out, unless—" Edris looked at Meadows. "I ask him," Meadows said. Meadows thought for a moment. "So, if Jonah interfered and brought Stephen Parry to the commune to confront Kern, he would have been forced to confess his true identity. So I don't know. You'd think his first instinct would be to run." "Or kill Stephen Parry," Edris said. "And bury him in the woods," Meadows said. "If there is another body in the woods," Edris said. "We don't know that Stephen Parry is dead. What we need to be asking is who killed the fake Kern," Rain said. "Jerome," Edris said. Meadows shook his head. "Why would Jerome kill Kern? They were best friends." "Exactly," Edris said. "We don't know who Jerome really is or what he did in the past. I'm betting fake Kern knew. It's too much of a coincidence that both men have hidden identities. They have to be connected by more than friendship. A crime, perhaps, but only Jerome was granted anonymity. Fake Kern's identity being revealed could have blown Jerome's cover. They both kill Stephen Parry, then Jerome kills fake Kern as he became a liability." "Good theory, but I can't see either of them killing a man," Meadows said. "Then again, my father did keep his identity secret all these years, and Jerome is hiding something. The thing is, I have never seen Jerome violent. I don't think I've ever heard him raise his voice. We've known him all our lives." "He could have just snapped," Edris said. "What about Jonah?" Meadows asked. "He would know if Stephen Parry came to the commune, and if he didn't leave alive. He may know who killed our father and is hiding." "So it could be him creeping around our teepee and the woods," Rain said. "He hears about the discovery in the woods and wants to point you in the right direction." "It's possible. It was dark, so whoever it was could have attacked me," Meadows said. "That clearly wasn't their intention. I'm still sure there is something in the woods. There are only a few of the violets left in that place in the woods now. It's like they are marking the spot. Then we were led to more violets last night. They must be leading us to something." "Or someone is playing a sick game," Rain said, "trying to distract you." "So what are you going to do?" Edris asked. "Speak to Jerome, then we start digging," Meadows said. "I better get going," Edris said. He pulled his feet from the water. "We'll walk back with you," Meadows said. The three of them walked to the bottom of the track where they waved off Edris. "I bet you wish you were going with him," Rain said. "Yeah, it feels odd being on the outside of the investigation. At least we are not completely in the dark." "Yeah, it was good of him to come and give us the info." "And risky," Meadows said. "We may as well start digging. There's not much else we can do." Rain groaned. "If we must." "Even if we don't find anything, it will satisfy my curiosity," Meadows said. "We'll go and find Jerome first, see if he will speak to us about his past." "I doubt it," Rain said. "You're better off speaking to him alone. You're his favourite." "I'm not," Meadows said. "I don't mind. You've spent the most time with him." "That's what makes all of this harder." They reached the pagoda and found Jenny setting up for lessons. "I thought you two were going to play around in the woods this morning," she said. "We got delayed," Rain said. "Maybe it's a sign," Jenny said. "It's too hot for manual labour, and you've both been ill." "I'm used to working in the heat," Rain said. "You may be, but Jerome, Iggy and Cosmo are too old for all that." "She's right," Meadows thought. "We don't expect them to dig," he said. "They'll probably stand around telling us how we should be doing the job. Have you seen them this morning?" Iggy was sitting outside his caravan. I saw Cosmo going off to water his plants, and I haven't seen Jerome." "Maybe he's hiding indoors to get out of the trip to the woods," Meadows said. "I'll give him a shout." Jenny turned to Rain. "While he's doing that, can you give me a hand? I need to get some jugs of water and glasses for the children." "I remember you teaching me," Rain said as they walked along. "You used to scare the shit out of me." "Good. You were a little sod. Couldn't stay still for a minute." "Now it's a job to get him moving, he's so laid back," Meadows said. They reached Jerome's yurt, and Meadows stopped. "I'll see you back by the pagoda." "Jerome!" he called out. There was no answer. "Jerome, are you still sleeping?" He pulled open the door. The first thing that hit him was the acrid smell of vomit. Then he saw Jerome. He was lying naked just inside the door, his eyes wide and mouth gaping. One arm was stretched out as if he had been trying to reach the door. "No!" Meadows cried out. He reached down to touch Jerome, but stopped himself. He didn't need a feel for a pulse. He'd seen enough death to know. He backed out of the yurt and crashed into Jenny. "What's happened? I heard you shout." Meadows turned around and did his best to block Jenny's view. Rain was standing behind her. "I'm so sorry," Meadows said. "No!" Jenny tried to push past him. "You can't go in there," Meadows said. "You don't tell me what I can do!" Jenny shouted. "Please," Meadows said. "We need to call the police. He'll have to be examined, so the fewer people that go inside, the better." "Who would do this?" Jenny asked. Meadows shook his head. "He may have been unwell and just died in the night." He didn't believe his own words, but he needed to calm Jenny. "You'll get a chance to see him, but not now." "Come on." Rain put his hands on Jenny's shoulders. "I'll take you to Iggy. Let Winter deal with this." Jenny shrugged away Rain's hand. "This is your fault," she said. "You couldn't leave things alone. I'll never forgive you." She stormed away. Chapter 20. The peace of the commune had been shattered. There were police everywhere, their faces red and patience short in the heat. They asked questions and scribbled in notebooks. Forensic officers were in Jerome's yurt, and all around, members of the commune stood in groups crying. The mercury had broken Wales's heat record, and Jenny felt like her heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces and would never be whole again. It didn't seem right to her that the sun beat down from a cloudless sky whilst strangers examined Jerome's body. It should be raining, she thought, the wind howling and the cold stinging your face. That's what she wanted, to be soaked to the skin and freezing to numb the pain. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jerome was the one that held them all together. She felt the heavy ball of grief just below her ribs. She knew what it was as she had felt it when her son died, and then with the loss of Mags. It will spread and consume me, she thought. It was Jerome that brought her back to life those times. Now he wasn't here to help. It was all coming back, the smoky darkness that swirled around her mind and seemed to be in the air she breathed, always present. Iggy sat down next to her. His face was red and his eyes puffy from the tears. "Did you find Cosmo?" she asked. "No," Iggy said. "He'll come back." "He was in such a state," Jenny said. "He can't deal with it." "Yes, he can." Iggy covered her hand with his own and gave it a gentle squeeze. "He'll deal with it in his own way." "I don't know. He was throwing things around and shouting before he ran off." "It's just his way of expressing his feelings. Better he lets out the grief." "What are we going to do?" Jenny asked. "I don't know." Jerome left a letter with me to give to Winter when he died. I just didn't expect it so soon."
"Don't give it to him,"
Jenny said. I promised.
"When was this?"
"A while ago," Iggy said.
"Where is it?"
"It's safe with my solicitor."
"You have a solicitor?"
"Well, yes. There is no one to carry out my wishes when I go. I have his details in my caravan, so whoever has to sort through my stuff will find them. Do you think I should tell Winter about the letter?"
"Not yet. We don't know what's in it. Maybe he wanted a clean conscience when he died."
"Do you think that's what happened?" Iggy asked. "That would mean—"
"Yeah, you, me, Cosmo, or Mina," Jenny said.
"I would never hurt Jerome or any of you," Iggy said.
"That's what you would say," Jenny said. "I can't be certain that I can trust you or the others."
"I could say the same about you," Iggy said. "You're the one that knew Jerome the best. You're the one he confided in."
"Do you see my point, Ig?"
Jenny looked at him and saw uncertainty in his eyes. "Mina has been acting strange. I saw— Oh, never mind."
"What did you see?"
"Nothing. It doesn't matter," Iggy said.
"Do you want to be next?"
Jenny asked.
"You can't just blurt things out without explaining. Now it sounds like you know something."
"Well, I don't," Iggy said. "We don't know that someone is responsible for Jerome's death. He could have just died in his sleep." Jenny wished she hadn't put ideas of mistrust into Iggy's mind. Now she would never find out what Mina was up to. Mina was the only one she couldn't be sure of. She wished she didn't have to play this game.
"I'm sorry, Iggy," she said. "I don't know where my mind is."
"It's okay. You've had a shock. We all have. I still can't believe it. Look, the boys are coming. This must be awful for them. First their father, and now this." Jenny looked up and saw Rain and Meadows walking towards them.
"They're not boys anymore,"
Jenny said. She didn't feel like talking to them, but it would look odd if she took off now. "How are you two holding up?" Meadows asked. "To be honest, I feel dazed," Iggy said. "The police will want to talk to the two of you," Meadows said. "If there is anything you know, please tell them." Jenny didn't say anything. She looked at Iggy, who shook his head. "If you don't want to talk to the police, you can talk to me," Meadows said.
"It's the same thing,"
Jenny said, then instantly regretted it.
"We don't know anything."
"Do you think that someone killed him?" Iggy asked. "We won't know until after the post-mortem," Meadows said. "If it's any consolation, I didn't see any marks on him, so I don't think he was attacked." "He went back with you last night," Iggy said. "Did he say he was feeling unwell?" "No," Rain said. "He stayed for a while, had a drink with us, then went off. He just said he was tired." "Earlier you said it was my fault Jerome had died. Why did you say that?" Meadows asked. Jenny could see the hurt in his eyes.
"It was just the shock. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it."
"But it is your fault," she thought. Both of them had caused Jerome's death. They just didn't know it. Chapter 21. Meadows watched the activity around Jerome's yurt. Blackwell was giving out orders to Valentine and Edris, who had been called back. Uniform were walking around collecting information, and Daisy was inside examining Jerome. It felt odd being on the outside, watching his team at work. He wanted to be part of the investigation, the one asking the questions. There was a gnawing pain just below his ribs. He tried to ignore it, block out the pain of what had happened, but all he could think of was Jerome lying on the floor. He wondered if he had cried out for help during the night and no one came. This felt so much worse than when he had discovered his father's death. There hadn't been a relationship for so long. With Jerome, it was different. He'd been a constant in his life, always there. Meadows couldn't imagine life without him. The commune wouldn't be the same. Blackwell hadn't said much when he arrived. He just glanced his way now and again. Mike from forensics had offered his condolences on the death of his father and his friend, and talked for a few moments. Everyone else on the scene had acknowledged him, but said very little. He guessed it must be as awkward for them as it was for him. He'd spoken briefly to Iggy and Jenny. Cosmo had run off somewhere, and he suspected that Mina was in her yurt, hiding with her grief. All he could do now was sit and look at the scorched grass and hope he heard some snippet of information. Finally, Blackwell approached him. "Can we talk?" "Yeah, of course," Meadows said. "I am sorry about Jerome," Blackwell said. "I know you were fond of him." "Thank you." "Where is Rain? I will need to speak to him." "He took a group of children to the stream. Thought it best to keep them out of the way." "Probably a good idea," Blackwell said. "So you were the one to find the body?" It felt odd to refer to Jerome as the body. It was like he was already being depersonalized. Meadows nodded. "I shouldn't have to ask you if you touched anything." "No, I didn't, but I've been inside his yurt on numerous occasions. As you'll find, so have most of us." "When was the last time you saw him?" "Last night. He came to my place for a chat before going to bed." "Just you and him?" "No, Rain was with us." "What time was this?" "About 10. "What did you talk about?" Blackwell asked. "Just about everything that's been going on and how he met my father." "Did he tell you anything of interest?" "No, not really. They met volunteering for a homeless project. Dad came to help him work here and stayed. Before you ask, no, he didn't know him by any other name." "Did you get the impression he was lying?" Meadows thought for a moment. "I think he knew more than he was telling me. I would say more evasive than lying." "Did he seem worried? Depressed? Say anything that in hindsight may have been a warning sign?" "No, nothing like that. He was just tired. I thought he didn't look well, but none of us have been feeling that good. There's a few people gone down with the virus in the commune, including me and Rain. I thought Jerome was going down with it, or it was just the heat." "Did you see or hear anything out of the ordinary last night?" Meadows told him about the intruder and the polytunnel. "Did you get a good look? Was it male or female?" "It was dark," Meadows said, "and I had just woken up. It was not a small person. That's the second time someone has been creeping around." "And it's this Cosmo character who grows these plants you say are used to mark graves?" "Well, they're not only for graves. People have them in their gardens. Still, you can't ignore the fact that some believe they bring peace in the afterlife." "So maybe he was growing them ready for Jerome?" "No, I don't see it. Cosmo and Jerome are very close. He reacted badly when he heard the news. Besides, Cosmo is small. I'm fairly certain it wasn't him." "Okay, but this person could have been in Jerome's yurt," Blackwell said. "I guess so, before they came to me, but not after. Rain checked all around the commune. I stayed outside watching. No one came back." "I should have checked on Jerome and the others," Meadows said. "You weren't to know," Blackwell said. "So, what's the initial impression? Natural causes? He was in his 70s. Or do you suspect foul play?" Blackwell was thoughtful for a moment, and Meadows thought he wasn't going to answer. "I'm not sure," Blackwell said. "As you saw, he wasn't in bed. He'd been violently sick and looked like he was trying to get help. We'll have to wait for the post-mortem, but given the recent discovery of the remains and other information that I can't share, I will be treating his death as suspicious." "Maybe now would be a good time to search the woods," Meadows said. "And what exactly would I be looking for?" Blackwell asked. "Stephen Parry, Kern Meadows, Lee Morris, and Jonah are all missing. I think there's more going on than just the remains that were found." "Who says all these men are missing?" Blackwell asked. "Well, you haven't found them," Meadows said. "And you think they are all buried in the woods?" Blackwell shook his head. "I think the heat is getting to you." "I didn't say they are all in the woods. But I think there's something to be found there." "Yes, because of the flowers." Meadows didn't like the sarcasm in Blackwell's voice. "The same flowers that were found with my father's remains, and the fact that someone led me to that particular spot in the woods. The flowers are nowhere else that I've seen. That and the fact that none of these men have been seen for years, you must admit that something isn't right." "Yeah, remains found in the woods and now a suspicious death, but that's not a good enough reason to search the woods. I can't waste valuable resources because of some bloody flowers," Blackwell said. "Unless, of course, there is something you're not telling me." "No, I've told you everything I know. But one of the missing men might have information." "I think there are people here that know what happened," Blackwell said. "I'll be starting with them." Meadows noticed that Valentine and Iggy were walking towards them. Iggy was mopping his brow with a handkerchief. In the other hand, he carried a mobile phone. It was the first time Meadows had ever seen Iggy with a phone. Most people on the commune had them, but as the signal was sporadic, few carried them. "You found him. Good," Blackwell said. "Take him to the station. I'll be there as soon as I can. Take Edris with you." "Why are you taking in Iggy?" Meadows asked. "It's okay," Iggy said. "I've got nothing to hide. Look after the others, especially Cosmo. He's taking it badly. Oh, and if I'm gone for a while, feed my cats." He turned to Valentine. "Come on then, lovely. Let's go and find this lad and get on our way." Meadows watched them walk away, then turned to Blackwell. "Why Iggy? He wouldn't hurt anyone." "Are you sure about that?" Blackwell asked. "Did he tell you about his past, or his name, Tobias Ignatius Seeley?" "No. Clearly you don't know these people at all," Blackwell said, and walked away. Meadows could feel anger mixing with his grief. The feelings of frustration of not knowing the facts and being unable to help those he cared for made him want to throw something. Jenny was right, he thought. Jerome's death was his fault. Someone had been wandering around the commune. If he'd been at home and someone was in his house, then the police would have been called. Forensics would have been checking for traces of the intruder. Why should it be any different here? Someone had come into his home twice. He should have acted. Meadows walked back to his teepee, took the notebook and pen from his backpack, and started writing. When Rain came back from the stream, papers were laid over the floor. "What's all this?" Rain asked. "I'm trying to make sense of everything, and in the absence of an incident board, this is the best I can do." He pointed to the paper in the center, where he had written, "Dad?" "Stephen Parry, Lee Morris, and Kern Meadows are all linked." He pointed to their names listed down one side. On the other side were the names of the olds. "We know Kern Meadows and Jerome Glynn had been in prison. Now it seems that Iggy also served time." "Iggy? What did he do?" "I don't know. Blackwell wouldn't tell me. We can conclude from the block on Jerome's file that he was given a new identity. Our father also used a false name." "Let's just call him Fake Kern," Rain said. "Okay, so they both hide away here. Then along comes Jonah. We know he likes to play games. He gets a kick out of stirring up people's pasts. He went out of his way to track down Jenny's ex-husband. we know that Stephen Parry hasn't been seen since 1999, around the same time that fake Kern was murdered. There is a strong possibility that Jonah tracked down Stephen and brought him to the commune to confront fake Kern. This could have forced fake Kern to reveal his true identity.
Makes sense so far,
Rain said. Mina said she saw Jonah coming out of the woods with blood on his clothes. She remembers it well because it was the summer solstice celebrations. Whose blood?
It has to be fake Kern's, as he was buried in the woods, and that evening was the last time he was seen,
Rain said. So if Jonah killed fake Kern, what happened to Stephen Parry?
Maybe he was never here,
Rain said. Okay, but we're still down to Jonah being our prime suspect. So what's his motive? Unless Stephen killed fake Kern and ran off. Jonah tries to cover it up by burying the body. Meadows thought for a moment. No, I can't see that. Jonah would likely have enjoyed the drama of the police being called. Why would he cover it up if he hadn't killed fake Kern himself? Maybe we should be asking why Jonah took pleasure in uncovering people's pasts.
Could he be looking for someone?
Rain said.
He wants revenge for something that happened to him, or someone close. He plays these games so he can delve into people's histories. Maybe he gets some release for his anger. He pushes the people in the commune because he guesses they are not who they say they are.
My thoughts exactly, Meadows said.
Yeah. So Jonah brings Stephen Parry to the commune, and fake Kern reveals his true identity. Jonah kills him because he's the person he's been looking for.
That's a good theory, Meadows said. You could have made a good detective.
The other possibility is that Stephen Parry and Jonah are one and the same. He bides his time and kills fake Kern, thinking he is the real Kern Meadows.
It's not how Stephen's sister Christine described him. He was a drug addict, suffered with his mental health. Jonah was a fit, confident man from what I remember. No signs of drug abuse. Mina would have noticed if he was an addict. She also said that Jonah had served time. Stephen Parry has never been to prison.
Okay, so Jonah killed fake Kern,
Rain said. Seems logical, but why did the other olds discount Mina's concerns? Kern was missing the morning after she saw Jonah with blood on his clothes. Why is it that no one has seen or heard from Jonah? Mina said Jonah left the commune the day fake Kern went missing. Then he came back. Why would he come back if he had killed Kern?
Okay, too many questions, man. My head is starting to spin.
Rain said.
Okay, so if you were in charge of this investigation, what would you do?
I'd be actively searching for Lee Morris, Kern Meadows, Jonah, and Stephen Parry. Then there is an intruder in the commune. The witness, namely me, says they were led into the woods where there are the same flowers that were also found with the remains of one unknown male.
So you would search the woods on this information?
Given the meaning some of the members of the commune place on the plants, yes, I would.
So why haven't you?
Rain asked. Because there is always something stopping us.
Something or someone?
Rain asked.
So, let's go now.
They dug in the woods until dark, starting beneath the patch of violets and working their way out in a circle. Then at first light the next morning they started again. They didn't see Cosmo, Iggy or Jenny, but Mina brought them something to eat and topped up their water bottle. She didn't talk much. Meadows could see she was weighed down by grief. Her eyes were dull, and she appeared to have aged years since the discovery of Jerome's body. They had been digging for a few hours, and Meadows was beginning to wonder if their efforts were in vain, when he spotted discoloration in the soil. "Hold on," he said. He knelt down and gently moved the earth with a gloved hand.
"What is it?"
Rain asked. "A bone." Chapter 22. Meadows and Rain watched from behind the cordon as forensics continued the excavation of the bones. Blackwell stood watching the proceedings. Valentine broke away from the group and walked over to Meadows.
"I guess you attempted to say I told you so,"
she said. Meadows shook his head. Blackwell didn't have enough to justify a search. He wants to look like he is doing a good job in my absence. It would have been a huge risk to use resources on my hunch and some flowers. Can you imagine if he had, and the search didn't yield anything?
"You're too nice," Valentine said. "If you hadn't taken the initiative, those remains may never have been found."
"Well, someone wanted them found," Rain said.
"Your tent creeper," Valentine said.
"Don't call them that," Rain said. "I'll never sleep tonight." Meadows laughed. "If they were going to harm you, they would have done it by now. Plenty of opportunity. It's a bit late to be worrying." He turned to Valentine. "I take it you let Iggy go. I heard he's back, but I haven't seen him." Valentine checked over her shoulder to make sure Blackwell was still occupied.
"We haven't charged him, and we had no reason to hold him. That's all I can tell you, but he does have a connection to the real Kern Meadows. Things might change depending on what we find here. Do you think he could be involved?"
"I don't think so, but who knows," Meadows said. Blackwell strolled over to the cordon. "The two of you may as well come and take a look. I owe you that much, as you were the ones to find the remains." Meadows ducked under the tape and followed Blackwell with Rain and Valentine. The makeshift grave wasn't more than 4 feet deep. Even so, Meadows thought it would take a lot of effort to dig it alone. He crouched to look at the bones, which were all intact, the victim laying prone. His eyes travelled from the skull downwards. "Oh," he said. "Yeah, that was my thought," Blackwell said. "What?" Rain asked. "No visible plate in the right femur," Meadows said. He looked at Mike, who was collecting samples. "I take it the plate would have been securely fitted." Mike nodded. "Even if it wasn't, you would see some damage to the bone." "So, not Kern Meadows. Well, the real one," Blackwell said. "That's who I would have expected." "Stephen Parry?" Meadows suggested. "We collected a DNA sample from Christine Parry when we were trying to identify the first remains that were found. I thought at the time it might have been Parry, given what you told me. As soon as we can extract the DNA sample, we'll compare the sample along with dental and medical records." "Will you now consider searching the rest of the woods?" Meadows asked. Blackwell frowned. "You think there are more bodies buried here?" "You have 4 missing men, Jonah, Lee Morris, Stephen Parry, and Kern Meadows. Unless you have found one of them." "No," Blackwell said. "No trace of any of them." "One is probably this poor soul. Still leaves 3 missing," Meadows said.
"Then there's our father," Rain said. "We still don't have a name for him. Could he have been Lee Morris?"
"That would make sense," Meadows said. "He would have known Kern Meadows." "I guess that's possible. We'll need to get medical records and track down a family member for DNA," Blackwell said. "In the meantime, we have 2 unidentified sets of remains and Jerome Gwynn lying in the morgue. What the hell do you think is going on here? I thought this was supposed to be some loved-up hippie camp. Peace Valley, my ass. It looks like a bunch of ex-cons killing each other off. Or one of this lot," he threw his arm in the direction of the commune, "is a serial killer." Meadows didn't know what to say. It wasn't the place he thought it to be. The place he grew up surrounded by love, where people respected each other. "I don't have any answers for you," he said. It does look like this has something to do with the car crash, or maybe something more sinister they were all involved with. He expected Blackwell to say something about Jerome, but he made no comment. If he brought up the subject, he would risk getting Edris into trouble. I don't have any good reason to believe there's more to be found here, but unless we look, we can't be sure. We? Oh, I don't think so, Blackwell said. You've already done enough. I'll take what I have to Lester. It will be up to him to authorize a thorough search. I don't suppose you have Jerome's post-mortem results? Meadows asked. I am expecting the results soon, but you know I can't discuss the details with you. I understand that, Meadows said. At the very least, I would like to know if it was natural causes or foul play. Blackwell nodded. We are trying to trace his next of kin. I can't help you with that. He mentioned a family, but said they were all estranged. I bet he did. What do you mean by that? Rain asked. Jerome Gwynn isn't who you thought he was. That's all I can tell you. I think it's best the two of you go home now and let us do our job. And I would appreciate it if you stayed out of the woods. Okay, Meadows said. He knew he wouldn't get any more information from Blackwell. He was grateful that he had been allowed to see the uncovered remains. What now? Rain asked as they walked out of the woods. I don't know. It's clear Jerome must have done something bad in the past, but we're not likely to find out anytime soon. Yeah, but I can't see Jerome killing two people, Rain said. I never saw him lose his temper or even raise his voice. No, Meadows agreed. And if Jerome is the killer, then who killed him? That's if someone did. The danger is that without another explanation, Jerome could well end up taking the blame whether he is innocent or not. He's not here to defend himself. He'll be judged on his past deeds. Well, being given a new identity means he must have done something serious, Rain said. Then there's Blackwell's talk of a serial killer. I can't see Jerome as a cold-blooded killer, but maybe my judgment is clouded, Meadows said. Don't be so hard on yourself, Rain said. Let's go back to your makeshift incident board. Smoke a few joints, which will help you think. And I'm sure you'll come up with something. Meadows laughed. If only getting stoned would solve everything. Maybe not, but it will make you feel better. I want to find Cosmo first. Ask him about the plants in the polytunnel. Then I think we should talk to Iggy. He's been avoiding us. Meadows' phone trilled. He took it out of his pocket and looked at the screen. Edris, he said, before answering. Can you talk? Edris asked. Yeah, it's just me and Rain. Good, Edris said. Can you meet me somewhere? I don't want to come to you and risk running into Blackwell. I could meet you at my cottage, or I could come to your place, Meadows said. Your place is probably best. I'll get Daisy to meet us there. Daisy? Is everything all right? Yeah. I just don't want to do this over the phone, and Daisy has some info for you. I'll explain when you get there. See you in about an hour. Edris hung up. That didn't sound good, Rain said. No. If Daisy is involved, then I'm guessing it's the post-mortem result. Wouldn't she have called you herself? I did tell her not to share information. I don't want to get her into trouble. Edris could have given the news to me on his own. Unless Jerome was poisoned, in which case we are going to fall under suspicion, as we were the last ones to see him. Or... Actually, I don't have an or. They had only been in the cottage for a few minutes when Edris turned up. You look a bit better today, Edris said. Yeah, I feel a lot better, Meadows said. While I'm here, I'm going to take a shower and get this beard off. He noticed Edris had 2 files in his hand. You got something for me? Yeah, shall we wait for Daisy? I'm sure you can explain, Meadows said.
She's just good with the details, Edris said.
Meadows thought that Edris looked uncomfortable. Let's go into the sitting room. It's cooler there. Something to be said about old stone walls. Edris sat in the armchair and Meadows on the sofa. Rain handed Edris a drink, then sat cross-legged on the floor. So, what have you got for us? Meadows asked.
As much as I can. Blackwell's beady eyes are watching everything I do. Lucky for us, he's occupied in the woods. As you already know, we found Iggy's identity, and he has a prison record. Tobias Ignatius Seeley. The guy is minted and titled.
Really?
Rain asked. I know he has a posh accent, but he carves out bits of wood to sell for a living. Not to mention that battered caravan he lives in. He's the son of Lord Robert Seeley, Edris said, sole beneficiary to his father's estate. Added to that, he already had a trust fund left by his grandfather, which matured when he was 25. Part of the reason we held him so long yesterday was that we had to wait for his lawyer, or I should say a team of lawyers, to turn up. As you can imagine, he grew up privileged. Went to boarding school, then on to Cambridge University studying physics. Clever bugger. During his time there, he got involved with a group of animal rights activists.
I can see that of Iggy, Meadows said.
He attended a lot of protests and had some minor charges for criminal damage. He got off. No doubt Daddy paid to keep him out of prison. Then the group took things a bit further. They started targeting laboratories, letting animals out, smashing up things. Then one night they blew one up. A security guard was caught in the explosion and died. Iggy was charged with manslaughter and served 5.5 years.
Shit, Rain said. I can't imagine Iggy in prison.
We've looked at his prison records. He didn't have an easy time. He was a target, I suppose. Because of that, he ended up moving around a lot. At some point, he would have been inside at the same time and same prison as Kern Meadows and Jerome Gwynn. We're not certain that they were placed in the same wing. We're still looking into it.
So he could well have known the real Kern Meadows and the identity of Jerome Gwynn.
Edris nodded. What we do know is that they were all released around about the same time, within months of each other, and stayed at the same halfway house.
So what did he have to say about that? Rain asked.
Not a lot. He said he didn't mix with the other residents, and we have no proof. We challenged him on the fact that he ended up in the same commune as Jerome Gwynn. That's where his lawyers stepped in. They weren't messing about. We had nothing on him. So we were told that he had answered our questions and any more should be addressed to them in the future. I thought Blackwell was going to burst a blood vessel.
Even if Iggy did know Jerome's true identity and the real Kern Meadows, he would have no reason to harm them, Meadows said. It would be the other way around.
Why not tell us that our father wasn't Kern Meadows? Rain asked. It would have saved us a lot of stress, and the police a lot of time.
Maybe he didn't want us to know his part in the lie, Meadows said. In his own way, he may have thought he was protecting us.
Yeah, but from what? Rain asked.
Edris shifted in his seat.
This is where it gets complicated. You remember I told you that information on Jerome Gwynn was blocked? Well, now he's dead, we've been granted access to the file. His real name is Philip Carew. He was convicted at the age of 11 for murdering 8-year-old Craig Wilson.
Rain shook his head.
Jerome? I don't believe it. He was such a gentle soul.
The name Craig Wilson stirred something in Meadows' memory, but he couldn't grasp it. Before he had a chance to ask any questions, the door opened and Daisy walked in.
Sorry I'm late, she said. Bloody traffic with everyone either coming from or going to the beach.
She looked at Edris.
Have you?
Not yet, Edris cut in. What? Meadows asked.
I've completed the post-mortem on Jerome Gwyn, and he's not Jerome Gwyn, or who Jerome Gwyn is supposed to be. Chapter 23. Iggy crept out of the caravan and looked in both directions. There was no one about. He wanted to get to Mina's yurt without being seen. So far, he had managed to avoid everyone on the commune, so there had been no questions. He knew they would come. Everyone had seen him being taken away by the police. Now shame covered his body like a prickly heat rash. Mina's yurt was further down the field, and he moved quickly, keeping his eyes fixed ahead. He made it without seeing anyone and called out. "Come in," Mina called back. Iggy opened the door and found Mina sitting with Cosmo and Jenny. "Oh," he squeaked and backed away. "Don't be silly, Iggy," Jenny said. "Come in and sit down." Iggy closed the door and sat on a cushion next to Mina. "You okay, Ig?" Mina asked. "No, everyone is talking about me. They'll think I killed Kern."
"No one thinks that," Cosmo said.
"What did the police say?" Jenny asked. "Just asked a lot of questions about Kern and Jerome," Iggy said. "Why did they want to talk to you?" Jenny asked. "Why not one of us?" Iggy looked at Mina. "What does it matter now? Everyone is going to find out. It's because I did time." "Yes, but a long time ago, surely," Mina said. "You've been here as long as me." Iggy was relieved that she didn't look angry or disappointed. The truth was that he always liked Mina. He would have liked it if they were more than friends. But she was too good for him, he thought.
"What were you in for?" Cosmo asked.
"What does it matter?" Jenny said. "It's none of our business. What's important is what we do now." "What is there to do?" Iggy asked. "The police know about Kern, and if they don't know now about Jerome, they soon will."
"They're going to come for me," Cosmo said, and jumped up. "I have to go. Leave."
"Calm down," Jenny said. "They're not going to come for you. Even if they do, it will only be to ask questions."
"They'll know."
"How can they possibly know?" Jenny said. "Know what?" Mina asked. Cosmo looked from Mina to Jenny. "Nothing," Jenny said. "We've all run from something in the past."
"Enough of this," Iggy said. "Mina knows." Cosmo turned to Iggy. "What? Why the fuck would you tell her? It's not... Ah!" He hit his head with his fist.
"All right, matey, there's no need to get angry," Iggy said. "I had a few to drink and I had to talk to someone. After the remains were dug up, I didn't know what to do. Jerome, well, I didn't bloody know. He said it was all sorted. I never thought—" "None of us did," Jenny said. "You just have to keep calm, Cosmo. Everything will be all right." "Will it?" Mina asked. "What I want to know is who they've dug up by the old sycamore tree."
"What?" Iggy couldn't believe what he had just heard.
"If you hadn't been hiding out in your caravan, you would have heard," Jenny said. "Winter and Rain found, well, bones, early this morning."
So Winter was right. Someone was leading him to the woods to show him. Iggy looked at each of them in turn. "Well, it wasn't me," Cosmo said. "I was with Jerome."
"Don't look at me," Jenny said. "It has to be one of you," Mina said, "which means you also put the body in the ground in the first place." An uncomfortable silence fell.
Iggy had a good idea of who was found. What he couldn't understand was what he was doing in that part of the woods. Chapter 24.
You mean Jerome is Philip Carew? Rain said. Edris just told us that.
That's not what I mean, Daisy said. She sat down on the arm of Meadows' chair and took his hand in hers. Jerome had a plate fitted in his right femur. That and the other injuries show that he's Kern Meadows. Meadows finished for her.
Well, that's a turn-up,
Rain said.
I had already requested Jerome's medical and dental records, or rather Philip Carew's, Daisy said. I checked them against the remains that were discovered, those of your father. They are the same.
Meadows saw the same look of shock on Rain's face that he knew must be showing on his own. Death by reckless driving was one thing, but a child killer, a child that had murdered another child.
I'm sorry, Daisy said. There's no doubt. It must be an awful shock for the two of you.
This is why I didn't want to do this over the phone, Edris said. Does Blackwell know? Meadows asked.
No, not yet, Daisy said. I tried to call him with the results, but his phone went straight to voicemail.
He wouldn't have reception in the woods, Rain said.
I called Edris, Daisy said.
I couldn't leave you in the dark, Edris said. I spoke to Lester and told him the situation. He agreed that I should be the one to tell you about Philip Carew. Blackwell is not going to like you going over his head, Meadows said. Screw Blackwell, Edris said. Actually, at first, Lester wanted to speak to you himself, but I thought, well, as we're partners, I hope you don't mind. I expect he will contact you. Meadows nodded. Thank you.
Why did Kern and Jerome swap identities?
Rain asked. Good question, Meadows said. We also have to ask ourselves what else Jerome lied about. We're talking about the fake Jerome now? Edris asked. I can't get my head around it.
Tell me about it,
Rain said. Let's just call them by the names they were using, Meadows said, or we'll all get confused. Maybe that's why they swapped identities, Edris said, to cause confusion. Yeah, but who did they want to deceive? Meadows asked. When I think about it, they did look similar. Both dark hair, tall and trim. I guess it wouldn't have been difficult to step into each other's shoes.
There's more I need to tell you, Daisy said. Without overcomplicating things, it appears that Jerome was poisoned.
With what? Meadows asked. Daisy shrugged.
I ran the initial tox screen. It came back negative for alcohol and the usual drugs. Now we have to look at rarer poisons. Despite his age, he was in good health. Whatever he took stopped his heart. There are other markers to indicate poisoning. What I am certain of is that he didn't die of natural causes.
He could have taken something voluntarily if he killed Kern Meadows, the fake one, and this other unidentified individual, Edris said. Meadows shook his head. There was nothing in his behavior that would suggest that he intended to take his own life. Besides, he would have left a confession. I take it no note was found. Edris shook his head. There was nothing found at the scene. No empty bottles of pills or liquid. Everything taken will be tested for traces of substances. There's also the way I found him. He was near the entrance of the yurts, stretched out. It was like he was trying to get help. Daisy squeezed his hand.
We better go and see Mum,
Rain said. Yeah, I better get back before Blackwell picks up his messages, Edris said. These are copies of the files on Iggy and Philip Carew. He handed them to Meadows. I gathered all the information I could on Philip. Court transcripts, newspaper articles, all the statements, even contacts for Philip's remaining family. Chris from Tech and Paskin helped put it together.
We thought you'd want to know, well, all the details.
Thank you, Meadows said. Thank the others for me. I appreciate everything you've done.
I'll come with you to see Fern, Daisy said. I'm not in a hurry to get back to work.
Fern Meadows sat on the sofa looking from Meadows to Rain and back again.
I'm so sorry for the two of you, she said. You must be devastated. All I can say is he was 11 years old at the time. I know that is no excuse, but there has to be more to it. I knew your father, maybe not by his given name, but you don't share a bed for over 17 years without getting a sense of a person. I just don't see him as a cold-blooded killer. You have to ask what sort of upbringing he had to have caused him to kill another child at such a young age.
I haven't read the file yet, Meadows said. I thought you should see it first. Fern shook her head.
I don't think I want to read through the details. You read it and just tell me the bare facts. I'll go and make us all something to eat. The two of you look like you've lost weight since all this started. I'll give you a hand, Daisy said.
Rain sat down next to Meadows, who opened the file and took out a newspaper article. The headline was large and bold. Devil's Spawn. The trial continues today in the case of murdered schoolboy Craig Wilson. Craig was just 8 years old when he was tortured and murdered by 11-year-old Philip Carew. Testimonies were heard from Craig's older brother Gareth and friend Alan Penny. The two boys, along with Craig, had been out playing with Carew on that fateful day. Both boys told how that day Carew had been angry that Craig had to tag along with them. Carew then persuaded the boys to go to Gregson's quarry to swim in the lake. The quarry is well known to locals, with the lake having dangerous undercurrents and freezing water fed from underground. Surrounding the lake are rugged cliff faces with a dangerous path leading down. The area is fenced off with warning signs. Local children are forbidden to go near the quarry. It appears that Carew goaded the other boys to go with him, claiming he had swum in the lake many times. During the long walk back to the quarry, Carew became increasingly agitated with Craig and tormented him, going as far as throwing him to the ground at one point. The little boy had cried, begging Carew to let him go home to his mother. Carew had then dragged Craig to the cliff face. The other two boys were too frightened to stand up to Carew. Carew, a tall boy for his age, is a known bully at school. Once they reached the cliff, Carew then threw Craig from the top. Gareth Wilson wept as he told how he had seen his brother go over the edge and hit a ledge before falling into the water. He then scrambled down the path and pulled Craig's lifeless body from the water. Carew threatened to kill the boys if they didn't help bury Craig and keep it a secret. The boys were terrified and went along with the story Carew had concocted, that Craig had wandered off alone and they couldn't find him. A large-scale search was launched to find Craig. It was 2 days later that Gareth, after being questioned by the police, broke down and told them what had happened to his brother. During the trial, Carew showed no remorse for his actions and has been seen grinning during the proceedings. Carew's parents have not been present at the trial, and it is believed they have fled from the area. A verdict is expected later this week. Below the article was a large picture of Craig Wilson, the baby-faced boy smiling at the camera. 2 of his front teeth were missing, and long lashes framed innocent eyes. Meadows handed the article to Rain. I thought they were not allowed to name minors in the press, Rain said. It was 1966, Meadows said. Things were different back then. That's why he would have been granted lifelong anonymity. He wouldn't have stood a chance of a normal life after he was released. Meadows took out more articles and looked through them. They were all similar and used the words evil and monster to make an impact. One even had a photo of Philip Carew, The dark-haired boy was unsmiling with sad eyes. Meadows studied the photo to see if he could see any resemblance to his father or to himself. He set them aside and read through the rest of the file. The last thing he saw were the photos from the post-mortem. The sight of the small body on the gurney made Meadows feel nauseous. All he could think about was the fear the child must have felt in his last moments. It's no wonder he never spoke of what he had done, he said.
I can't look at those,
Rain said, and shoved the photos back in the file.
I don't know how you deal with this shit every day.
It gets to me sometimes, but at least I'm out there trying to get justice for the victim. This, he pointed to the file, is different. I'm looking at a crime my father committed. He did this, there was no doubt. There's no looking for the perpetrator, no bringing closure for the family so they can try and rebuild their lives. This time the guilt and shame is on our family. I don't know who I am anymore.
Yes, you do.
Rain put his hand on Meadows' shoulder.
You are Winter Meadows, my brother. Someone who has dedicated their life to putting balance back in the world, making sure those who do wrong pay. This is not your legacy. It's bad, isn't it?
Fern came back into the room.
I can see by the look on your faces.
Well, it's not good, Meadows said. The newspapers always sensationalize a story to sell, so we can discard anything they report. He did do it, although in his statement he said it was an accident. It differs from the story that the other boys who were there that day told. It sounds like he was a troubled child.
Well, I guess we'll never know the why. It's not like he is here to ask him,
Fern said. I guess we have to ask ourselves what sort of upbringing he had, Meadows said. Fern nodded.
Children aren't born evil.
It looks like his parents just up and left him to deal with it, Rain said. I guess they were ashamed, Meadows said.
I would never leave you, no matter what you did, Fern said. The parents should have taken some responsibility.
But when does that stop? Rain asked. He's not the only child that has committed murder. When does a child become responsible for their own actions?
10 years old, according to the law,
Daisy said as she came into the room. There were others there that day, Meadows said. Craig Wilson's brother, Gareth, and a friend, Alan Penny. Craig's mother is still alive. There are contact details.
You're not thinking of talking to them, are you?
Daisy asked. I just want to know more, to try and understand. It would also be interesting to know if he tried to contact them, or if Jonah did.
You may not like what you hear,
Fern said. It can't be worse than this. Meadows pointed to the file. Anyway, the family may not want to see me, especially if they are involved in Dad's murder. The fact that Dad could never be his true self makes me think that he was ashamed and still haunted by what he had done. He glanced at the file. I remember where I've seen Craig Wilson's name. It was on a headstone in the graveyard you found when you followed Dad.
It shows he never forgot what he did,
Fern said. Meadows nodded. According to the others at the commune, he was talking to Jonah those last months. What if he did make contact with Craig's family?
Even if that was the case, they would be unlikely to tell you,
Rain said.
He's right, Daisy said. Why put yourself through that?
I just want to know, Meadows said. If he did make contact with them, then he would have had to reveal his identity. After that, he wouldn't have to hide. He may have wanted to take back his own name. Maybe Jerome didn't want people knowing who he really was, what he had done.
No, Fern said. Jerome would never have hurt your father.
Doesn't Jerome own the land? Daisy asked.
That belongs to Philip Carew, and now you. Maybe he didn't want to lose it. Good point, Rain said. We didn't have any money back then. What if Dad wanted to sell the land so we could pay off the mortgage?
Then who killed Jerome, and why? Meadows asked. It's probable that Jerome was murdered to stop him revealing the killer. Iggy knew them both, was in the same prison and halfway house as them. He must have known about the swap. I think it's time for him to give us some straight answers.
I don't think you should go back there, Daisy said. Jerome's been poisoned. It's not safe for you. You already said someone's been creeping around your teepee while you're sleeping. I'm with Daisy, Fern said. I couldn't bear it if anything happened to either of you.
Whoever was creeping around has had plenty of opportunity to hurt us. I don't think it's their intention. I'll be fine. I won't eat or drink anything I haven't prepared myself, Meadows said.
Rain said. I'm coming with you.
Fern shook her head.
Well, I guess I can't stop you, and at least the two of you will be together. Come on, let's eat.
After the meal was finished, Meadows walked out into the garden with Daisy. I'll be home soon, Meadows said.
Just promise me you'll be careful.
Daisy put her arms around him and rested her head against his chest.
I worry about you.
No need. Rain and me have each other's backs. Nothing is going to happen to us. Chapter 25. Meadows woke up feeling better than he had in days. He got up and dressed before stepping outside the teepee. Rain was sitting cross-legged on the grass reading a book. You're up early, Meadows said.
Yeah, I'm feeling good this morning. There's a nice breeze. I think the heat wave is on the way out.
I think you may be right, Meadows said. I better get going. Sure you're going to be okay, yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to sit here or by the pagoda and watch out for Iggy. He can't stay away much longer.
I wouldn't be too sure. Jenny says he went with Cosmo to some other communes to spread the word about Jerome. They want to hold a memorial here for him. I guess a lot of people will come.
Well, they've already been gone a night. I doubt Iggy will stay away from his cats much longer.
Meadows smiled. Yeah, you're right.
Don't worry. I'll work my charm on him and get the information you need. I've got tea, water, and plenty of the bottles of dandelion water Mina gave us. You going to be all right seeing Craig's family? I can't see it will be an easy conversation.
I'll be fine. It's just his brother and his mother Dorothy, who was in her 90s.
I'll see you when you get back. I'll have food ready, and I'll make sure no one even sniffs it.
It took over 2 hours for Meadows to reach the retirement home in Gloucester, by which time he was feeling nervous. The gated complex was surrounded by trees, and after he was granted access, he was shown into the gardens, which were a rainbow of colour, with filled wide borders and pots that laced pathways to seating areas. In the centre was a large fountain, which looked enticing. He followed a warden to the corner of the garden, who then pointed out a man sitting with an elderly lady under the shade of a tree. The man looked to be in his mid to late 60s, stocky with thinning grey hair. As Meadows drew closer, he could see the lady's eyes were cloudy and her face a map of wrinkles. Her skin was so translucent he could see her veins. Gareth Wilson? Meadows asked.
Yes.
The man didn't offer a smile.
You must be Winter Meadows. This is my mother, Dorothy.
Thank you both for agreeing to meet me, Meadows said.
You can thank my mother, Gareth said. What an unusual name you have, Dorothy said.
It does raise some eyebrows, Meadows said.
Come and sit down, Dorothy said. I'm afraid I can't see you very well. My eyesight is not what it used to be. Tell me a little about yourself, she said as he took a seat at the table.
Meadows gave a brief outline of his family and life.
A detective,
Dorothy said.
It sounds like you have an interesting life. You've done well for yourself, and your brother sounds like a character. Your parents brought you up well. I'm glad to hear that Philip's life changed after he left prison, and he had a family of his own.
Which is more than Craig had, Gareth said.
There's no need for that, Gareth,
Dorothy said.
Imagine if the shoe was on your foot. It is not his fault. I didn't raise you to be unkind.
Meadows smiled to himself. A child was never too old to be told off. Even at his age, Gareth looked suitably chastised. I'm sorry, Gareth said. It's just that it stirs up a lot of bad memories. But I guess this can't be easy for you. I understand, Meadows said. The last thing I want to do is cause you both any upset.
So what is it you would like to talk to us about?
Dorothy asked. As I explained on the phone to Gareth, I only found out about my father's past after he was murdered.
Must have been quite a shock for you,
Dorothy said. Meadows nodded. Yes, it was. I've read the case files, and what he did was inexcusable. I did find out that he regularly visited your son's grave, which leads me to believe that he did feel remorse for what he did. I was wondering if he ever tried to contact you.
Yes, he did,
Dorothy said. What? Gareth looked genuinely surprised. You never said that.
It was a long time ago. He didn't contact me directly. It was a friend of his. I don't recall his name.
Jonah? Meadows asked. Dorothy thought for a moment.
That sounds familiar. It could have been. Anyway, we were told of Philip's release, but not his new identity. Part of his release was that he would have no contact with the family. I expect that's why the friend came to see me. Arrangements were made for him to come and see me, but he never showed up. I guess he couldn't face me in the end.
Can you remember roughly when this was?
No, I'm sorry. Like I said, it was a long time ago. It was years after his release, because Gareth had grown up and left home. Is it important?
I don't know, Meadows said. What about your husband? Did he agree to meet with Philip?
Not that I know of. Mark and I were no longer together. Once Gareth had left home, there was nothing left holding us together. I can't say whether Philip tried to contact him. He never said. And, well, he's long gone now.
I think Philip did intend to come and see you, but he was murdered before he got the chance. I hope you're not suggesting that we had anything to do with it, Gareth said. Meadows didn't want to bring up the fact that Dorothy, her ex-husband, and Gareth all had a good motive for murdering his father. There would be many who wouldn't blame them, he thought. I think he was mistaken for someone else, he said.
Oh, dear, Dorothy said. Well, if it's any consolation to you, if we had met, and he had asked my forgiveness, I would have given it to him. I forgave him a long time ago. I had to, for my own peace of mind. Hatred is a double-edged sword. It not only damages the one you hold a grudge against, but it also pierces your own heart. Philip was just a child. That's no excuse for what he did, Gareth said. No, but you knew the sort of life he lived. His father was a horrible man. He used to beat Philip, and I'm sorry to say his mother was no better. He was unloved and uncared for. He took my Craig from us. I hated what he did, but it's not so easy to hate a child, especially one that suffered years of neglect and abuse.
Meadows felt his throat constrict with emotion. All he had felt was shame for what his father had done. Throughout his career, he had always tried to find the good in people. Even those who had committed murder, he had found, were often driven by the horrors in their own past. He had shown understanding and sometimes compassion, yet he had condemned his own father. "That's very gracious of you," Meadows said.
"Well, I hope you got what you came for,"
Dorothy said.
"Take some advice from an old woman. Don't let what happened in the past taint your life. In your case, it is not your shame to carry. Once you find out what happened to your father, lay it to rest. Time passes so quickly you need to fill your life with as much happiness as you can. Now, Gareth will see you out. I'm sure he can enlighten you more on your father's childhood."
"I don't see how," Gareth said.
"I think you do," Dorothy said. "I don't need to hear it. But I know a lot of things were never said, and a lot of questions went unanswered. You were just a child yourself when you witnessed the death of your brother. I know something from that day weighed heavy on you, even after all these years. Perhaps it's time you talked about it."
Gareth nodded. "I'll walk you to your car." "Thank you for talking to me," Meadows said. They walked silently back through the gardens. Meadows didn't want to push Gareth to talk, and he could sense his unease. "Your mother is a remarkable woman," he said when they reached the car.
"Yes," Gareth said. "I guess I've been lucky. She's right. There are things about that day I never talked about. I'm ashamed to say I wasn't truthful about what happened. I don't think it would have made a difference to Philip's sentence, but it may help you. It was a hot summer day. The weather much like the heat wave we're having. Philip, another friend, Alan, and me had planned to go to the quarry to swim. It was forbidden to go there, and we all knew we would be in trouble if anyone found out. It was never just Philip's idea. You know what kids are like. You don't see the danger. Anyway, we told our parents we were going for a picnic. Mum packed plenty of food and drinks, and as I was leaving, Craig started to whine. He wanted to go with me. I wasn't happy about it. Whenever he tagged along, he was a pain in the arse, bless him. I tried to get out of taking him, saying it would be a long walk, but Mum was having none of it, so he came along. We met up with Alan first, then Philip. Mum was right when she said he wasn't cared for. He had no food or drink with him that day. I didn't realize at the time, but looking back, the dirty clothes, the bruises, and him being always hungry should have been a warning sign. Something would have been done about it now, but back then no one interfered. Anyway, it was a long walk to the quarry. We stopped about halfway to have our picnic. Philip must have been hungry, but I think the thirst would have been worse. Craig teased him. He had some of his drink left and offered it to Philip. When Philip reached out to take the drink, Craig pulled his hand back and tipped the rest of it on the ground. It was a cruel thing to do.
"Kids can be cruel," Meadows said. "They do things without thinking." Gareth nodded.
Craig thought it was funny and was laughing. If I'm honest, Craig was a little spoilt, being the youngest, and he used to give me a hard time. Alan and me were no better. We could have offered to share our drinks and food, but we didn't. Philip got angry and shoved Craig. He fell, but I don't think he was hurt. He started crying and wanted to go home. The only way we got him to carry on to the quarry was by Philip giving him a piggyback. Philip struggled. He tripped once or twice and dropped Craig, who yelled some more. When we got to the quarry, I think we were all a little frightened. The cliffs were steep, and it looked impossible to get down to the water. There was a narrow path cut into the side, but it wouldn't have taken much for one of us to lose our balance and fall in. As we stood peering over the top into the water, Craig started off again. He wanted to go home and threatened to tell our parents where we had been if we didn't take him straight away. Philip just wanted to swim. We were all hot and tired, but Philip more so after carrying Craig without anything to drink. He just snapped. He pushed Craig, and he went over the edge. He hit a ledge on the way down before landing in the water. We all scrambled down the path, but it was too late by the time we got to the water. I think he was probably dead from the fall. Have you read all the statements given at the time?
Yes, and all the newspaper coverage.
Then you'll know I said Philip threatened me. He didn't. I was scared that my parents would find out I had taken Craig to the quarry. We all agreed to bury him and say he had wandered off. The days after were horrendous. My parents kept hoping Craig would be found, while all along I knew he was dead. I couldn't keep quiet any more. Alan and me came up with a story that we were afraid of Philip, and that he had threatened to kill us if we told. Like I said, I don't think it would have made much of a difference. He did kill him, but maybe public opinion would have been different. They called him a monster.
I'm not sure the truth would have made a difference to the public. The newspapers still would have painted a grim picture. It's what sells. You were just a boy who had witnessed your brother's death. You shouldn't have any regrets about what you said back then.
Gareth nodded. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you for your honesty, Meadows said. It has helped to know a bit about Philip's past. As Meadows drove back to the commune, he played over the conversation he had with Dorothy and Gareth in his mind. He hadn't got a sense of hatred towards his father from either of them. Both claimed they didn't know his new identity. Or so they say, he thought. Then there was the ex-husband, Mark Wilson. It was possible that Jonah had contacted him. He could have taken revenge for his son. The trouble was that Dorothy couldn't give a time frame of the visit, and even if any of them were involved, he would have no proof. They certainly weren't the ones creeping around the commune, he thought. Added to that, there was no motive for killing Jerome. Jerome had to have been murdered because he knew too much. All these thoughts swirled around with no conclusion. He phoned his mother and filled her in. Then he listened to music for the rest of the journey. He only hoped that Rain had had more luck with Iggy. When he arrived at the commune, he walked the track and stopped to talk to a few people on the way to his teepee. Rain wasn't sat in the pagoda, so he guessed he must be indoors. "You in, Rain?" he called out as he pulled the canvas back. The sight that met his eyes caught his breath, and time seemed to freeze. Rain was lying on the floor next to a pool of vomit. Next to him, Mina knelt, one hand cradling his head, the other trying to force a black substance into his mouth. Meadows pitched forward and pushed Mina's hand away. "What have you done?" he shouted.
"Nothing," Mina said. "I found him like this. I'm trying to help him."
"Rain," Meadows said as he put his face close to his brother's. Rain groaned. Meadows turned to Mina. "Go and call for an ambulance, now!" He turned his attention back to Rain. Hold on. Help is coming. You're gonna be okay.
Rain's eyes were open, but he didn't seem to be able to focus. Make them go, he said.
Who? Meadows asked.
Stick men.
Okay, Meadows said. I'll make them go away.
No, they're outside. Don't go out. They're everywhere. They're gonna get us.
Meadows could see the terror on Rain's face. Whatever he was seeing was very real to him.
I won't let anything get us. I'll make sure nothing comes in here.
Rain nodded and closed his eyes.
Stay awake, Meadows said. Come on, open your eyes. Talk to me.
Rain opened his eyes for a moment. Then they rolled back, and he started to convulse.
Help us!
Meadows cried out as he cradled his brother. Chapter 26. Meadows paced the hospital corridor as he waited for news on Rain. He had still been breathing when the ambulance brought him in, but his pulse was weak. He heard footsteps approaching and turned around. Fern and Daisy were running towards him.
Where is he? Fern asked.
The doctors are with him. They're doing everything they can. Meadows put his arms around his mother. I'm so sorry.
Don't, Fern said. This is not your fault.
Daisy put one arm around Meadows and the other around Fern.
How did this happen? Fern asked.
I don't know, Meadows said.
We still haven't had a result from Jerome's toxicology. I've called to chase it up, Daisy said.
Thank you, Meadows said. Come and sit down, Mum. He led Fern to a seat and then sat next to her, holding her hand, while Daisy held his other hand. They sat in silence until Blackwell and Valentine arrived. What happened? Blackwell asked. Meadows stood and moved away from Fern and Daisy to speak to Blackwell. I don't know. I found him in the teepee, barely conscious. He wasn't making any sense. He wouldn't have eaten or drank anything that was given to him. He was fine when I left this morning. Then someone must have spiked his food or drink, Blackwell said. Valentine, get on to forensics. I want a team up there to go over the teepee. He turned to Meadows. Whoever has been in there will have left some trace. Problem is, most of the commune at some time have been in there, Meadows said. Then at least I'll have reason to get them all in for questioning, Blackwell said. Meadows nodded. A doctor approached, and Fern jumped up from her seat.
How is he? We are doing all we can, the doctor said. Until we know what he's ingested, the best we can do is flush his system. We've given him something to help with his blood pressure, and we are trying activated charcoal. It may bind the poison and stop it being further absorbed into his bloodstream.
Meadows thought of the black substance Mina was trying to get Rain to drink. Maybe she was trying to help, he thought.
That's the best we can do for now, the doctor continued. Until we know what we are dealing with, we can't administer an antidote. Can we see him? Fern asked.
Of course, the doctor said. I'll head up to the commune, Blackwell said. If I have to tip that place upside down, I'm going to get some answers. Meadows didn't doubt Blackwell would come down heavy on those in the commune. At this point, he didn't care, if it meant getting answers.
Keep us updated, Valentine said.
She touched Meadows' arm before following Blackwell down the corridor. Meadows walked into Rain's room behind his mother. The sight of Rain lying with monitors attached to his chest, a drip in his arm, and an oxygen mask tightened Meadows' throat. Fern took a seat next to the bed and held Rain's hand.
You fight this. The doctor has just got to find the right stuff to give you, and you'll be fine. I know you can hear me. I'm staying right here until you wake up.
Meadows felt helpless as he took his brother's other hand. Daisy went to fetch drinks, and silent tears fell down Fern's face. Time ticked away with the bleeping of the monitors. A nurse came periodically to check Rain's vitals. Then a doctor. Plastic cups of tea were drunk, and they talked any nonsense to fill the silence until Meadows could stand it no longer. "I'm going to the commune," he said. Daisy shook her head.
"It's too dangerous." "Let him go, love," Fern said. "He needs to do this for Rain. Standing here watching isn't helping."
Daisy nodded.
"I'll stay with your mum. Promise you'll call to let me know you're okay."
"I'll call every hour to check in on Rain."
"I'll keep pestering the lab,"
Daisy said. Meadows leaned down and kissed Rain on the forehead before hugging his mother. He squeezed Daisy's hand. "Look after them for me." It was chaos at the commune. Most were gathered near the pagoda where uniformed officers were trying to take statements. It was clear the people there didn't like the invasion of privacy. They were close up to the police officers and shouting. One of the group, Martin, rushed over to Meadows. "How is he?" "Not good," Meadows said. "I'm sorry, honestly, but this isn't right. They want to search our homes. They're looking for whatever was used to poison Rain and Jerome." "You're saying someone poisoned them?" Martin shook his head. "There's no one here that would do that. Are you going to stand by and let this happen? For fuck's sake, these are your people. We're your family." "Rain is my brother, and I will do what it takes to save his life," Meadows said. "There is no doubt that someone here tried to kill him. If you truly think yourself as my family, then you'll help. The sooner they find what they are looking for, the quicker they'll go." "Fine," Martin said. "Oi! Oi!" he shouted. A hush came over the crowd, and they looked towards Martin. "We know we have nothing to hide. Answer their questions and let them search. I know you're not happy about it, but do it for Rain. He needs our help." There was a general murmuring, and slowly the crowd backed down. "Thank you," Meadows said. "Did you see Rain today?" "Yeah, he was sitting under the pagoda reading. I stopped for a chat." "Did you see him eat or drink anything?" "He had that water bottle he usually carries with him. He looked fine." "Anyone else come to talk to him while you were there?" "No." "Okay," Meadows said. "I'll leave you to take control here and make sure there aren't any problems. The last thing we need is for someone to be arrested. Any distractions will only damage the police's efforts to help Rain." Meadows left Martin and walked to his teepee where Blackwell was talking to Mike from forensics. "What are you doing here?" Blackwell asked. "Looking for answers," Meadows said. "I can't stand around watching my brother fight for his life and do nothing." Blackwell nodded. "We haven't found anything of interest so far." "It doesn't help that someone cleaned up before we got here," Mike said. "Who?" Meadows asked. "Mina," Blackwell said. "Claimed she didn't want you coming back to the mess." "She was with Rain when I found him, trying to get him to drink something. Charcoal, I think. She claimed she was trying to help him." "Do you believe her?" Blackwell asked. "I can't think of any reason why she would want to hurt him, but just now I don't trust anyone. She hadn't called for help, and she would have had to run back to her yurt or the distillery to get the charcoal. There was no one else around." "Sounds like a good enough reason to take her to the station for questioning," Blackwell said. "Anything else?" "No, she has no motive that I can think of for killing Jerome or my father. She does have knowledge of plants and herbs. She makes all sorts of tonics, oils, and lotions. The distillery, which is basically a wooden cabin, is mainly for her use." "Right, I'll go and find her and take her to the station. Mike, you might want to check out this cabin, see what you can find." "Yeah, I'm not going to get any more from here." "What did you find?" Meadows asked. "Not a lot. We've bagged up a cup that was used, along with a stainless steel water bottle which was on the floor. There's a half-drunk bottle of something or other." Mike pointed to the evidence crate. "Dandelion water," Meadows said. "He's been drinking it for days." "I guess someone could have dropped something into it when he wasn't looking," Mike said. "We'll get it all tested. If there's a trace of any unusual substance, we'll find it, even if we have to stay up all night." "Thank you," Meadows said. "Come on, I'll show you the distillery."
"You can suit up if you're going inside," Mike said with a smile. "It could be a crime scene, so technically I shouldn't be letting you in."
Meadows slipped on protective clothing and led Mike to the wooden cabin. He didn't know what he hoped to achieve going in, but at least he felt like he was doing something. He opened the door and stepped inside.
"Is it usually kept locked?"
Mike asked. "No," Meadows said. "Nothing is locked here. We work on trust." In the first section of the cabin, there were rows of herbs drying on racks. Meadows examined them. Mint, thyme, and rosemary he recognized, along with some other common herbs. Above them, lavender hung in bunches, and shelves held bottles and containers ready to be filled. Below, a long table of demijohns filled with amber liquid bubbled away. Meadows moved forward and opened the door to the partition. In this section, there was a copper kettle sitting above a burner. Piping was attached to the spout and ran across to a metal cylinder. There were various chopping knives and grinders on the bench, along with dried roots and leaves.
"Recognize any of these?"
Mike asked. "No. Well, that looks like ginger root. The others I'm not sure."
"Okay, we'll bag the lot and take them to the lab. See what we can identify. Maybe we'll get lucky."
"I'll leave you to it," Meadows said. Outside, he peeled off the protective clothing and made a call to Daisy. There was no change in Rain's condition. The only upside was that he hadn't deteriorated further. He promised to call again, then hung up as he heard a commotion. He hurried towards the noise, where he found Blackwell with Mina and Iggy protesting.
"You've no reason to take her," Iggy said.
"If you're going to be obstructive, then I'll have you arrested," Blackwell said.
"I'll be fine,"
Mina said. Meadows thought she looked anything but fine. He could see her hands trembling and tears pooled in her eyes. Iggy turned on Meadows.
"Are you going to just stand there and let him take her?"
It was a rare sight to see Iggy angry. He was red in the face, and his fists were clenched into balls. Jenny and Cosmo came hurrying up to them.
"What's going on?"
Jenny asked.
"This buffoon is taking Mina to the police station," Iggy said, "and he's not doing anything about it."
"I couldn't stop him even if I wanted to," Meadows said.
"What's that supposed to mean?"
Cosmo stepped closer to Meadows. Jenny grabbed hold of Cosmo's arm and pulled him back.
"Let's just all calm down," she said.
"You're supposed to be one of us," Cosmo said, "not taking sides with them." "I'm not taking anyone's side," Meadows said. "Rain is seriously ill. All I'm interested in is helping him."
"That's all we want to do," Jenny said.
"Then you all better start talking. Let Mina go with Blackwell so he can do his job."
"Fine," Iggy said. "Just give me a few minutes."
He took off before Blackwell had a chance to protest. "What's he up to?" Blackwell asked. Meadows shrugged. "Just give him a moment."
"I would never hurt Rain," Mina said. "You have to believe me."
"I don't know what to believe anymore," Meadows said. "I don't think any of you have told me the whole truth. If you want to help, then answer Blackwell's questions. We need to find out what poison was given to Rain."
"I don't know,"
Mina said. "What were you giving him when I found you?"
"Charcoal. I mixed it with water to try and get him to drink it. I thought it might help him."
"Why didn't you just call for an ambulance?" Blackwell asked.
"There wasn't time,"
Mina said. "But you went to get charcoal. You could have called out for help," Meadows said.
"I had the charcoal with me. I was afraid after what happened to Jerome. I thought if the same happened to me, I could take the charcoal and get help."
"How did you know that Jerome had been poisoned? I only just found out myself."
"I overheard the forensic officers talking about it."
It's a reasonable explanation, Meadows thought, although she could be covering her tracks. I'm sorry, Mina. You still need to go to the station.
It's fine, Mina said. I don't trust anyone either.
Iggy came back panting heavily. He handed a card to Mina. That's the details of my solicitor. I'll call him to tell him to come and help you. Wait for him.
I can't afford.
It will all be taken care of, Iggy said.
Thank you.
Right, let's go, Blackwell said. Meadows turned to the others. We need to talk now. I have to call the solicitor, Iggy said.
I want to make sure the police don't make a mess in my yurt, Jenny said. They're making their way towards me.
Okay, fine, Meadows said. I'll meet you all by the pagoda in an hour. I need a drink, Cosmo said. I'll bring some of my brew. Meadows shook his head. I suggest we all bring our own drinks until we know what's going on.
I can't believe you think that one of us would be responsible,
Jenny said. Are you going to tell me who it is then? Meadows said. Jenny bristled.
I don't bloody know.
You all know more than you think you do, or more than you were willing to tell. There's been enough death. I think it's about time you were all honest with me.
You're right, Iggy said. We'll meet you in an hour.
Chapter 27. Meadows spent the next hour sterilizing the remaining mugs, glasses, and bottles. Then, using the water he brought with him, he brewed mixtures of tea and filled the glass bottles. He had a feeling it was going to be a long night, and the cold ginger and mint tea would give him some energy. He didn't want to leave the bottles unattended, so he put them in his backpack and then walked to higher ground to make a call to Daisy. Rain's condition remained the same. It was not what he wanted to hear. The more time that passes, the more damage the poison will do to his body, Meadows thought. I need answers, fast. He checked the time, then walked to the pagoda where Iggy, Cosmo, and Jenny were sitting quietly. Meadows sat on one of the cushions, cross-legged, and took a bottle of cooled ginger tea from his bag. He took a sip, then placed it safely between his legs. The light was fading, and dotted around the pagoda were jars of candles with flickering flames. The air was warm and scented with honeysuckle that twisted around the posts and mixed with sweet peas. The atmosphere should have been serene, but it was charged with anxiety, which seemed to fill the air like static. Cosmo was twitchy, Iggy's face creased with concern, and Jenny looked ill. Are you okay, Jenny? Meadows asked.
I'm perfectly fine, Jenny said, other than being ordered to come here on top of having police go through my things.
I'm sorry, Meadows said, but it was necessary. You do want to help Rain.
Of course I do. We all do. But I don't see how.
You'd be surprised how often people hold valuable information without realizing it, Meadows said. Just now I would be happy if you went to the hospital to get checked out. Given what's happened to Rain, you don't look well, and I'm worried about you. I can arrange to have someone take you and bring you back while I talk to Iggy and Cosmo.
I told you I'm all right, Jenny snapped. I don't feel ill. I'm just tired. So can we get on with it?
Okay, Meadows said. I know you all knew about the swap. What swap? Cosmo asked, his legs jigging. Enough of the bloody lies, Meadows said. He took a deep breath. I sound like Blackwell, he thought. He took a drink from his bottle. I'm sorry. I'm just worried about Rain. I don't mean to take it out on all of you. That's understandable, Iggy said. Meadows nodded. The swap I'm talking about is the one Kern and Jerome made. Kern was Jerome and Jerome was Kern. But Kern was also Philip Carew. What? Cosmo said. You're not making any...
Sense, Iggy said. They don't know. They came along after me, Kern, and Jerome moved here.
But you knew, Meadows said. Why didn't you tell me?
Because your father didn't want you to know his identity. Jerome wanted to keep his secret. He promised your father.
I need a drink, Cosmo said. He unscrewed a bottle and poured a large glass of wine. Anyone want one?
I will, Jenny said.
I don't think anyone should be sharing, Meadows said.
I don't care what you think, Jenny said. I happen to trust my family. If I do drop down dead, then you'll have your answer.
I didn't. Cosmo shook his head, his eyes wide in horror at the suggestion.
I know, Cosmo. Jenny squeezed his hand. Drink your wine. You have nothing to worry about.
Why the swap? Meadows asked.
You'll know by now they served time together, Iggy said. During that time they became friends. Well, more like brothers. Philip was consumed with guilt for what he had done, and so was Kern. What had they done? Jenny asked. Kern, or Jerome as you knew him, caused the death of 4 people by drink driving. One of them was his brother. Philip, who you knew as Kern, I don't know. He never talked about it. As for me, I caused an explosion in a lab. A security guard died. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I had a hard time inside. I was referred to as the rich kid and was a daily target. Kern and Philip looked after me. When the time came for our release, Philip tried to take his own life. Meadows remembered the scars his mother had talked about on his father's arms. Was he frightened of what would happen to him when he left prison? He asked. Yes. I knew he'd been inside since he was 11 years old. Moved from a secured adolescent unit to adult prison. He knew nothing of the outside world. He said he'd been called a monster most of his life, and he believed he was. He didn't think he deserved to be released. He thought everyone on the outside would hate him. He had no concept of people moving on with their lives and forgetting. His world was confined to the prison walls. You have to understand, when you go to prison, you lose your identity. You're just a number and the lowest in society. People think you are worthless, and you believe it. Philip more so.
That's sad, Cosmo said. He was a good guy. Nice man.
Iggy nodded. Philip's grandfather had left him this place, and Kern tried to persuade him it would be a fresh start, far away from people. Philip had been granted a new identity for his own protection, but even with that he was terrified. There were still men inside who knew who he was, his real name. He looked at Meadows. I'm guessing the police also knew his identity.
Meadows nodded. Only a small group, though. A designated police officer, high rank, who worked in the area would need to know. Then there's probation. His identity would have been secure. This would have been explained to him.
That may have been the case, but he felt like he would never be free. Kern talked him around. He told him he had an opportunity to be a new person, and he should grasp it with both hands.
But he couldn't just run away, Meadows said. He would have been on life license.
That's right, Iggy said. We all ended up in the same halfway house. It was only me and Kern who knew Philip's real identity, but he was still wary of people. We all did volunteer work, a part of being reintroduced to society. Philip kept close and only ever spoke to us. Kern was worried that Philip would try to end his life again. He was just existing. He tried again to get him to come here and see the farm and land, but he was still afraid. He thought people would connect him to his grandfather, and he wouldn't be safe. Kern offered to pretend to be him, so if there was any trouble, it would come back on him. So they came here, and Philip loved the place, and he thrived. Pretending to be Kern Meadows gave him freedom. He was the man who had made a stupid mistake, not the monster anymore.
"Is that it?" Meadows asked. "You're telling me the only reason they swapped identities is because my father was afraid he'd be found out? There wasn't some other motive?"
"Yes," Iggy said. "That's the only reason. I suppose it gave him another level of protection. The name Kern Meadows couldn't be linked to Philip Carew."
"What did Kern Meadows get out of it? I suppose becoming Jerome gave him ownership of the land."
Iggy shook his head. "You know better than that. Jerome never claimed the land as his own. Kern said he was happy to become Jerome Gwyn. He did it for his friend, to give him a chance of happiness. It also gave him an opportunity to escape his own past."
"I guess that makes some sense, but why keep their own date of birth?"
"I can't answer that," Iggy said. "Perhaps Jerome wanted to keep one small part of himself. Maybe Philip didn't want to be older. Who knows?"
"How did they get away with it for so long?"
"It wasn't difficult. They asked me to join them here, and after a while Philip became Kern Meadows to me, and Kern became Jerome Gwyn, and that's how I saw them from then on. Your father was happy here, and he gave others the chance to escape their past and rebuild their lives. They even managed to fool probation. When the old officer retired and they got a new one, they swapped places and it was never picked up. The probation officer would even contact Jerome and ask him for help with people struggling to adjust after release. That's how Haystack came to live here. I haven't a clue what he was inside for, but he's never been any trouble."
"So you're telling me that this place is full of ex-cons?"
"No," Iggy said. "It's only a few of us. The rest just came, mainly to escape mainstream society. This is my home. I've been happy here. Just because some of us have a past doesn't make our values and beliefs any less valid."
Meadows nodded.
"There were never any problems until Jonah came along," Jenny said. "I told you what he did to me, so I imagine that he tried to interfere in Kern's and Jerome's lives."
"I don't want to talk about Jonah," Cosmo said.
Meadows wondered what it was that Cosmo had done in the past. He was clearly distressed by the idea of anyone knowing. Perhaps Jonah found out, he thought.
"I'm sorry, we have to talk about Jonah if I'm going to have the chance of saving Rain," he said. "I need to know who killed Kern, Philip, or whatever you want to call him."
Philip became Kern Meadows. It's who he was, who he wanted to be, so that's what I will call him, Iggy said.
"So who killed him?" Meadows asked.
"Stephen Parry," Iggy said.
"You saw this?" Meadows asked.
"No."
Meadows looked at Jenny and Cosmo, who both shook their heads. "But you all knew."
"None of us knew until the remains were found," Jenny said.
"Then how do you know it was Stephen Parry who killed Kern?"
"Jonah was on at Kern and Jerome to join his stupid counseling sessions," Iggy said. "Kern was worried about it. Jonah had a way of finding out information. He would disappear for a few days, then come back asking questions. In the end, Kern took Fern and you boys away. Jerome just stayed out of Jonah's way. He was always stronger than Kern. Anyway, as you know, things didn't go too well for your mum and dad when they left here. This had been Kern's safe haven, and he struggled. Then, after they had that awful fight, Kern came back here. He started talking to Jonah, spending time in the big tent with him. Jerome was concerned about it. Kern kept saying he was a monster and needed to make amends for what he had done. Iggy sighed. It wasn't that Jerome was worried for himself. His concern was that Jonah would find out who Kern really was and give away his identity. He knew that would break Kern. Kern was becoming withdrawn, and Jerome couldn't get through to him. Then Kern and Jonah had an argument. Jonah took off for a few days. He came back in time for the summer solstice. There were a lot of people there that night. Stephen Parry turned up. I swear I didn't know who he was at the time. He seemed friendly. He asked me where Kern was, and I pointed him out. I would never have done if I'd known. Iggy shook his head. It's not your fault, Iggy, Jenny said.
The only one to blame is Jonah, Cosmo said. What happened then? Meadows asked.
I don't know, Iggy said. A little while later, Jerome asked me if I'd seen Kern. He said something about Jonah having done something stupid, and he was worried about Kern. I said the last time I saw him he was talking to Stephen Parry. I didn't know that was his name at the time. I offered to help look for him. Jerome said to check Kern's teepee and down the fields. If I found him, to bring him back to the bonfire. He said he would check the woods. I'd had a fair amount to drink, so I suppose it must have taken me longer than usual. I stumbled on some people, having fun. No one had seen Kern. I walked down the fields and back to the bonfire. There was no sign of Kern, Jerome, or Jonah, so I decided to go to the woods to check on them.
What time was this? Meadows asked.
I don't know. It was getting dark. As I got to the edge of the woods, I heard voices, so I called out. Jerome came out. He was in a state. He said there had been an accident. I said I would go for help, but he said no. He told me to go back to the party and make sure that no one came to the woods. That's what I did. Not long after, Mina came to me. She said she had seen Jonah come out of the woods with blood on his clothes. I thought that it was likely that Kern or Jerome had given Jonah a thumping, so I didn't think any more about it. The next morning everyone was hungover, and I didn't see Jerome until later that afternoon. He said Jonah had invited Stephen Parry to the party. That's when I realized what I had done. I had given Kern away. Jerome said that Stephen Parry and Jonah both now knew Kern's real identity, so Kern had to go away. I didn't know Kern was dead until the remains were found.
So, when did you know the remains were Kern's? Meadows asked.
I talked to Jerome. He said Stephen Parry had killed Kern that night. Why didn't he call the police? Jenny asked.
Because he wanted to protect.
Cosmo twisted his hand, as if turning a cog.
Protect them.
Who? Meadows asked. You, Iggy said. You, Rain, and Fern. If the police had been called, then the secret would have come out. Kern never wanted you to find out about his past. Jerome wanted to do that one last thing for his friend. All this time I thought Kern was in hiding. You thought he'd left you, walked out on your mum. Fern tried to pretend like she wasn't hurt and she could manage, but you were all struggling, emotionally and financially. All these years I blamed myself because I had pointed out Kern. Still, if I had realized then, none of this would have happened.
This isn't your fault, Iggy, Meadows said. He thought back on those times. Things had been hard for them.
He remembered Jerome and Iggy visiting. They brought food, vegetables and fruit they had grown on the commune, jars of honey and pickles. Then the mortgage had been paid off. He looked at Iggy.
It was you, Meadows said. You paid off the mortgage on the cottage. Iggy nodded. I wanted you to have a home and Fern not to have to worry. I knew she wouldn't take the money from me. Besides, no one knew of my background. I never wanted all that money, and it didn't even dent what I had in the bank, so I don't want you to think on it. At least I can say thank you for what you did, Meadows said. And that will do, Iggy said. We never mention it again. So, now you know everything. I wish I did, Meadows said. I don't know who the other poor soul is we found in the woods. I'm guessing that's Stephen Parry, Iggy said. Jonah came back after that night, so it can't be anyone else. Maybe Jonah killed him. I guess we'll never know. By the time you dug up the remains, Jerome was gone, so I couldn't ask him. When did Jonah leave for good? I don't know, Iggy said. He left after that night with Kern, then came back a few months later. He stayed a while, then was just gone one morning. Are you all positive that you saw Jonah after the summer solstice? Yeah, Cosmo said. Nobody wanted him around. I remember Jerome being upset when he came back. Now we know why, Iggy said. Yes, that's right. We talked about asking him to leave. Jerome didn't want him around for the winter solstice. Did he stay for the celebrations? I'm not sure, Iggy said. His forehead creased in concentration. The years just blend into each other. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly when he left. And now Jonah is back, Cosmo said. He killed Jerome and he's going to kill all of us. Jonah is not back, Jenny snapped. We would have seen him. Besides, what possible reason could he have for killing us? Well, if he did kill Stephen Parry, you were the only people who would know, Meadows said. The discovery of the remains was on the news. He may have come back to make sure no one talked. He turned to Cosmo. That night you and Jerome found me in the woods. Did you see anyone else? Hear anything? No, Cosmo said. I told you I went for a pee, and I saw you running. I didn't see anyone else other than you and Haystack. What about any other night? Have any of you seen anything unusual? Heard noises or felt like someone had been in your home? Meadows asked. No, nothing, Jenny said. But when I go to sleep, that's it until I wake. You could have a party around me and I wouldn't notice. Cosmo? No. Well, someone made a mess in one of the polytunnels. I think that may have been me, Meadows said. I thought there was someone inside. You've been growing violets. Yeah, Cosmo said. I always grow them, sell them to the locals. There were violets in the woods, Meadows said. Cosmo shrugged. I don't grow them in there. They've been there for years. Meadows thought it was pointless to try and work out who had put the flowers in the woods. They were easy to access. It could have been any one of them marking the grave. Even Jerome, as he knew Kern was there, he thought. What about you, Iggy? He asked. Have you seen or heard anything out of the ordinary? Well, it's probably nothing. But the night you were all in the woods, there were lights on in the distillery cabin. Mina, Jenny said. It was the middle of the night, Iggy said. Maybe she couldn't sleep. Or maybe she was mixing up something and didn't want anyone to know, Meadows thought. He drank down the last of his cold tea and stood up. He now had more information, but none of it was going to help Rain. He wanted time alone to think. He looked at Cosmo and Jenny, One more thing. Where were you two when Stephen Parry and Kern were together in the woods? I don't know, Cosmo said. Don't remember.
You know what the celebration is like, Jenny said. Music playing, people dancing, and lots of drinking. I expect we were all near the bonfire like we usually are. You're talking years ago. None of us could tell you where we were at a specific time. Even Iggy can't tell you what time he went into the woods.
No time of death, no witnesses, and no evidence, Meadows said. That's what you were all telling me. It's all very convenient.
Are you accusing us of being involved? Jenny asked. Iggy already told you what happened.
No, he didn't, Meadows said. He said that Jerome told him there had been an accident. Did Jerome specifically say that Stephen Parry had killed Kern?
Not exactly, no, Iggy said. When I asked him about the remains that had been found, he said that Kern had died that night and there was nothing he could do. I said it was because I had pointed out Kern to Stephen Parry. All he said was it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't to know that Jonah had invited him. It had to have been Stephen Parry, otherwise Jerome would have said so.
Unless he killed him, Meadows thought. I'll speak to you all in the morning. Meadows walked back to his teepee, picked up another bottle of cold tea, and walked up the field to call Blackwell. How are you getting on with Mina? Still waiting for the solicitor to arrive, Blackwell said. If it's the same one that came for Iggy, then we've got a long wait. How did you get on with the others? Meadows filled him in. Well, if Stephen Parry did kill Philip Carew, then I'm guessing one of the other two offed him. The likelihood is that the second remains we found are going to be those of Stephen Parry. It still doesn't answer who poisoned Jerome and Rain, Meadows said. I'll ask Mina about her being in the distillery cabin that night. At the moment, she isn't saying anything. I can't see a motive for her killing anyone, Meadows said. She was close to my father years ago, so if she thought Jerome killed him, then I guess she may have taken revenge. Still doesn't explain why she would try and kill Rain. I'll bring the lot in for formal questioning in the morning, Blackwell said. See if we can find any inconsistencies in their stories. Yeah, that's what I would do, Meadows said. He ended the call and talked to Daisy and Fern for a few minutes. Rain was responding to the treatment. His vitals were improving, which gave Meadows some encouragement as he went back to his teepee. He took out all the notes he had made and laid out his incident board. He added the new information. By the time he finished writing, his head ached and his mouth was dry. He made a cup of peppermint tea and looked at a spiderweb diagram he had drawn. No matter how hard he looked at it, he couldn't come up with a logical explanation. Jonah left that night. If he killed Stephen Parry, then why come back a few months later? If it had been Jerome who killed Stephen, then Jonah would have had a hold on him and most likely have taken head position in the commune, he thought. But Jerome had no motive other than the new identity and the land. In either of these scenarios, it didn't explain the poisoning of Jerome and Rain. Unless... He looked again at the lines linking the names and thought back to that last night with Jerome. They had been drinking the same tonic Mina had made. He and Rain had only had a small glass. They had given the rest to Jerome. The poison had been meant for me and Rain, he realized. The jugs of lemonade and the tonic that Mina brought them. Why didn't I see this before? He thought. All those days feeling sick. He ran his hand through his hair. He knew the answer. All the emotions, feeling unwell, the virus going around the commune, and the confusion with his father's identity. No wonder I haven't been thinking straight, he thought. He added this new scenario to his notes with the word why underlined. He checked the time. Another 15 minutes until he was due to call Daisy. His head was pounding now, so he took 2 paracetamols and turned off the lamps before lying on the bed. He just wanted to lay quietly for a few moments, but his thoughts wouldn't still. It's about my family, he thought. Punishment, revenge for what his father had done. But punishment for what Kern Meadows had done, or what Philip Carew had done. These were his last thoughts as he fell asleep. A piercing cry awoke him. He sat up, and pain, like a lightning fork, tracked down the nerves in his head. His t-shirt was soaked with sweat, and his mouth so dry he couldn't swallow. He grabbed a bottle from the side of the bed and glugged it down. He picked up his phone to check the time, but the screen was blurred. He blinked a few times, but still couldn't focus. He tried to get up, but his legs felt too weak to hold him. I need help, he thought. He knew he couldn't make it to the top field to get a signal, so his only option was to get outside and shout for help. He started to crawl towards the entrance. Don't go out there, a voice said. The voice startled Meadows, and he dropped his phone. The little light he had from the screen vanished. He turned his head, but he couldn't make out any shapes in the darkness. Who's there? Meadows asked. There was nothing but the sound of his own laboured breathing and the thudding of his heart, which seemed to be growing louder. He put his hand to his chest and felt the palpitations. It was as though his heart had risen to the surface and was trying to break through the skin. It's the cry of winter, the voice said. Your time has come. Meadows tried to scramble to his feet, but fell. Panic blinded his thoughts, and every muscle felt like it was going into a spasm. He sucked in the air. You're dying, the voice said. He tried to crawl while moving his hand around the ground to locate his phone. Then the pain came, razor-sharp fingers squeezing his stomach until he heaved. Time after time he kept retching. Around him the darkness closed in, and he felt himself falling into the blackness. Chapter 28. Iggy sat in his caravan drumming his fingers against his leg as he waited for news of Mina. He couldn't settle. After Meadows had left them, he had listened to Cosmo and Jenny discussing the reasons why Mina may have poisoned Jerome and Rain. Jenny had even suggested that one of them should go and persuade her to identify the poison. He was certain Mina wasn't responsible, and he wouldn't let her take the blame for it. Then again, she had offered him an alibi. Did it mean she knew something? The other reason he was unsettled was that he had lied to Meadows, or rather he'd omitted certain things. He stood up and paced the caravan. There wasn't much room, and it only took a few paces to reach the end. How long would it take the police to find out? Was an omission as damaging as an outright lie? These thoughts caused a lot of anxiety in his chest. He felt like a tightly coiled spring with no way of getting release. When he could stand it no longer, he left the caravan and walked down to the old farmhouse where the communal car was parked. The keys were behind the sun visor where they were always kept. Feeling action was better than waiting around, he started the engine and drove away from the commune. He found the police station easily, having only been there a couple of days ago. He wasn't given any information at the reception desk, but was told he could wait. More pacing, and what felt like hours later, Iggy saw his solicitor, Mr. Finch, who was on his way out of the police station. Mr. Seeley, I didn't expect to find you here again so soon, Mr. Finch said. It was strange for Iggy to hear his surname being used. I've come for Mina. Is she okay? Yes, she'll be along shortly. Iggy felt the anxiety leave his body. Thank you. Mr. Finch smiled. Pleasure. Any more problems, just call. A few moments later, Mina came out. Her face lit up when she saw Iggy. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him. Iggy felt a warmth spread through his body before she released him.
"Thanks for coming. I didn't know how I was going to get home," she said.
The thought of her being stranded hadn't entered Iggy's mind. He'd been more concerned that she would be charged with murder and kept in a cell. "Well, I couldn't let you walk," he said. "Come on, the car's outside."
"Mr. Finch was wonderful,"
Mina said as they stepped outside.
"He dealt with all the questions."
"Let's talk in the car," Iggy said, and opened the door for her, then settled in the driver's seat. "So, what did they ask you?"
"About my relationship with Kern, who was not Kern."
Mina shook her head.
"What a mess. Then they asked about Jonah, wanted my movements today, and then a lot of questions about the oils and tonics I make."
"What did you tell them?"
"There wasn't much to say about it. I kept my answers brief, like Mr. Finch advised. You know, I've been making those tonics for years. No one has ever got ill. You do believe that I didn't try to hurt Rain or Jerome?" she asked.
Iggy was quiet for a moment. He thought of the lights on in the cabin when she should have been asleep. Then there was her relationship with Jonah. Would she poison Jerome if Jonah asked her to, even after all these years?
"Iggy?"
"Yes, I want to believe you, but I saw you in the cabin in the middle of the night."
"When?"
"That night Winter said he followed someone into the woods. Sunday night."
"I haven't been in there late at night. You can't have seen me. It must have been someone else. Was it definitely a woman you saw?"
"No, I mean, I didn't actually see anyone. Just the lights on."
"I thought someone had been in there. Things had been moved. Then I went in early one morning and the copper pot was warm."
"Did you tell the police this?" Iggy asked.
"No. Mr. Finch said not to offer information."
"I need to ask you something. Why did you offer to give me an alibi for the summer solstice? You and I both know we weren't together." Mina sighed.
"Because I thought the others were up to something. I didn't want you caught up in it all and, well, I don't know how more obvious I can make it. I like you."
"I like you too," Iggy said. "You've always been a good friend."
"That's it. A friend."
"Oh." Iggy felt a fluttering in his stomach. "You mean, well, you and me?"
"We're too old to play games,"
Mina said, and touched his cheek. "I've always liked you," Iggy said, "but look at me."
"I am," she smiled. "You are the kindest, sweetest, and most generous man I have ever known."
Iggy leaned in and kissed her, and all his concerns melted away. He still felt his lips tingle when they drew apart.
"Is there any news on Rain?"
Mina asked. "No, I saw them taking boxes from the cabin. I guess they are hoping to find something there. You could help," Iggy said.
"The police?"
Mina's eyes narrowed.
"No."
"Think of it as helping Rain, not the police."
"I don't see how I can."
"Think about all the stuff you keep in the cabin. It's going to take them a long time to identify the different herbs and plants. If you were to look, you might find something that shouldn't be there."
"Yeah, and then I'll get the blame."
"If they do find anything, you'll be blamed anyway, so what difference does it make? It will look better for you if you help, and it will speed things up."
"Okay, but you're coming with me."
They walked into the station and asked to see Blackwell. At first, Iggy thought that he wasn't going to allow Mina to help, but after some phone calls, he agreed. Dressed in protective clothing, they followed Blackwell into the laboratory. This is Mike Fielding, our forensic officer, Blackwell said. Iggy nodded a hello. Come with me, Mike said. We've been trying to contact the botanist, but at this hour it's not easy. Just now we could use all the help we can get. We are looking for anything that could have been used to poison Rain. As you know the area, I assume you know which poisonous plants can be found.
Yes, Mina said.
So the question is, if you were going to poison someone, what would you use? Blackwell asked.
I don't think I want to answer that, Mina said.
Put it another way. What are we looking for? Mike asked.
Well, I wouldn't keep anything dangerous in the cabin. When I make up cough mixtures and any stronger tonics, I do lock them away. It's just for the safety of the children, but I haven't made up any batches recently.
They stopped by a long table where there were trays of evidence bags.
These are just common herbs,
Mina said, pointing to the various bags as she named them.
I guess you could be looking for some sort of fungi. You've got the well-known ones, Amanita bisporigera and Amanita phalloides. You'll know them as destroying angels and death caps. They would cause vomiting, convulsions, and delirium. If it's not treated promptly, it's fatal.
Iggy saw tears gather in Mina's eyes, and he gave her arm a gentle squeeze. I'm sure they would have considered those at the hospital, he said. Mina nodded.
There's lots of toxic plants like aconitum. You'd know it as monkshood, but it's not wild. It would have to be grown, and I haven't seen any in the commune polytunnels. I suppose someone could have grown it in their garden.
Aconite, Mike said. Mina nodded.
What else? You can make cyanide from laurel leaves, but he would have died in a matter of minutes.
She continued to look at the bags.
I'm sorry, there are so many possibilities.
You're doing great, Mike said. We can at least give a list to the hospital so they can test Rain. We'll also run tests here on the blood taken from Jerome Gwynn. With a bit of luck, we'll get a hit. Mina stopped and picked up a bag. She looked at Iggy.
This looks like the root of Atropa belladonna.
Deadly nightshade? Mike asked.
Yes, I do use it in cough mixtures. You have to be very careful with the doses. I use the berries as well as the root. The whole plant is poisonous.
So you've been using the root? Blackwell asked.
No, Mina said. I've been making oils. I'd never keep this among the other herbs. It would be too risky.
Blackwell nodded. It looks like we've found our culprit. Chapter 29. Meadows didn't want to open his eyes. He was no longer in pain or afraid. In fact, he felt comfortable. The last thing he remembered was being sick, the horrendous pain in his stomach and head, and someone standing over him. They were watching me die, he thought. Maybe I am dead. If I am, then it's peaceful. With that thought, he opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the bottom rail of a hospital bed.
You're awake.
Daisy leaned over him.
We were so worried about you.
Fern's face came into view. How did I get you? Meadows asked.
You didn't call us, Daisy said. We knew something was wrong. You wouldn't have gone to bed without first checking on Rain. I called Blackwell. He found you unconscious on the teepee floor.
Rain? Meadows sat up and his head spun.
Take it easy, Fern said. Rain is fine. I'll go and get him.
She kissed Meadows on the forehead and left the room. Meadows picked up the glass of water from the bedside and took a sip. I don't understand. I was careful.
It was deadly nightshade, Daisy said. It must have been in something you ate or drank.
No one had the opportunity to put anything in my water. I carried it with me at all times.
You're with us at last, Rain said as he came into the room. Man, I've tried some shit in my time, but that stuff has to be the worst trip I ever had.
Meadows laughed. Yeah, I second that. Still can't work out how.
Me neither, Rain said. I drank water, or the dandelion cordial which we had the whole time we were there.
I guess someone could have gone into the teepee when we were out and tampered with the bottles, Meadows said. I sterilized everything that was left and made my own drinks. Mostly cold tea I'd brewed myself. They were interrupted by the appearance of Blackwell, Valentine, and Edris, who all gathered at the bottom of the bed.
If I'd known we were having a party, I would have dressed for the occasion,
Rain said. Blackwell smiled. Valentine and me are just here to question the victim.
I just wanted to tag along to see how you were doing, Edris said.
I feel pretty good, Meadows said.
That will be the drip, Rain said. I don't know what they put in it, but it's good stuff. I'm just glad to see you're better, Valentine said. You gave us all a scare.
Meadows looked at Blackwell. I guess I have you to thank for finding me.
It was Daisy that alerted us, Blackwell said. I'm going to need to ask you a few questions. I'll leave you to it, Rain said.
You may as well stay. We need to speak to you as well.
Shall we go and get a cuppa, Fern? Daisy asked. Yes, Fern said. I don't think I want to hear the details. I've seen enough for the last couple of days.
Blackwell plonked down in the seat Fern had been using, and Valentine sat on the opposite side. Rain sat on the end of the bed, leaving Edris the only one standing. Have either of you any idea how you managed to ingest the poison, which we now know was belladonna?
We were discussing it before you came in, Rain said. Neither of us accepted any food or drinks from anyone. We used only the ones that were in the teepee.
Traces of belladonna were found in the bottle we found next to you. Also in the contents of another bottle. Whatever it was you were drinking.
Tea, Meadows said. It was just mint and ginger. I made it myself in a large pot, then cooled it in the bottles. It must have already been in with the tea.
So it could have been put in at any time, Blackwell said.
Yeah, Meadows said. There are several canisters with different teas. We think the root of the plant was used and possibly juice from the berries, Valentine said. She looked at Rain. You wouldn't have tasted it in the dandelion water. Apparently it has a sweet taste.
I saw your notes, Blackwell said. Well, a lot of them didn't make much sense, but I took them back to the station hoping that you'd left some clue as to what happened. There were some interesting points. You seem to be suggesting that you and Rain were the targets and not Jerome. Why?
Jerome was with us the night before he died, Meadows said. We had a jug of tonic. We only had a small glass each. We gave the rest to Jerome. Then I started to think about how sick both Rain and I had been since we arrived at the commune. Headaches, sickness, and cramps. We thought we'd caught the virus that's been spreading through the commune. There were a few people sick with it. Then Rain got poisoned. I figured the killer was trying it again.
And it was Mina that gave you the tonic? Blackwell said.
Yes, but she made it for us most mornings, Rain said. It was making me feel better.
If it was Mina giving us the poison, then why give us something to counteract it? Meadows said.
Perhaps she got the dose wrong, and you weren't given enough to make you seriously ill, Edris said. So she gives you something to make you feel better so you don't get suspicious, then tries again. When did you first notice you were feeling unwell? Valentine asked. Maybe if you can pin down what you drank, you can work out who spiked your food or drink. I was sick after the memorial evening, Rain said.
Yeah, but that was Cosmo's brew, Meadows said. Iggy was ill the next day too.
Yeah, exactly. I told you I don't get hangovers like that. If you remember, Cosmo brought you a bottle."
"And I gave it to Iggy," Meadows said. "Interesting," Blackwell said.
"Yeah, but Cosmo didn't bring us the tonic that we gave to Jerome,"
Rain said.
"Mina did."
"Did she hand it to you?" Edris asked. "No," Meadows said. "She left it in the teepee."
"Easy to tamper with," Valentine said. "After that, I was drinking water, the dandelion water or tea,"
Rain said. "Same here," Meadows said. "All which were left unattended. So Cosmo could have taken the opportunity to go into your teepee and doctor your water and tea," Blackwell said. "But why?" Meadows asked. "We still don't know who Cosmo is," Blackwell said. "How long have you known him?"
"All my life," Meadows said. "He's always just been Cosmo,"
Rain added. "Probably another one with a past to hide," Blackwell said. "He has got a temper," Meadows said.
"Yeah, but angry is his default mode,"
Rain said. "I guess it's more like frustration," Meadows said. "Besides, he wasn't in the woods the night my father was murdered. Iggy said it was Jerome, Kern, Jonah, and Stephen Parry." "Yeah, we saw that on your rambling notes," Blackwell said. "The other thing you should know is that the second remains we found were not those of Stephen Parry. Male, mid to late 30s, that's all we know."
"I don't understand."
"There was no one else with them," Meadows said. "According to Iggy," Edris commented.
"If it's not Stephen Parry, then who is it?"
Rain asked. "If Jonah invited Stephen Parry, then he could have invited someone else," Blackwell said. "Craig Wilson had a brother, Gareth."
"Who is very much alive," Meadows said.
"Don't tell me you went to see Craig Wilson's family," Blackwell said.
"I did. I told them who I was. I didn't go in any official capacity, if that's what you're worried about."
Blackwell huffed. "The only reason I haven't been able to see them yet is that you got yourself poisoned. Added to that, Philip Carew's new identity also covered his family, namely yourself and Ring. This was supposed to be handled sensitively. Well, you fucked that up."
"You did say that you thought you and Rain were the targets," Valentine said. "Is it possible that Craig Wilson's family took revenge on your father and wanted to make you suffer as well?"
"There is no way that Gareth Wilson has been creeping around the commune," Meadows said. "Any stranger would stand out."
"You said yourself that someone was in your teepee at night, then in the woods and fields. If he only came at night, then he wouldn't have to be seen. He could have poisoned your tea when you were asleep."
"Maybe there is a member of the commune who is related. They could have integrated themselves and waited for the opportune moment," Edris said. Meadows thought of all the families in the commune. No one stood out. "Why wait 30 years to take revenge?" he asked. "It doesn't make sense. I don't think this has anything to do with the Wilsons." They were all quiet for a few moments. Meadows' head was the clearest it had been for days, and still the whole thing didn't add up. Now there was an unidentified male, 2 murders, and years later another murder and 2 attempted murders.
"Is there anything else you can think of, or anyone that is missing?" Valentine asked.
"Jonah came out of the woods that night," Meadows said. "We know he came back sometime close to the winter solstice. Well, that's what Iggy told me." "We still can't find Jonah," Edris said. "What about Lee Morris?" He was the only one other than Iggy who knew that Jerome and Kern were not who they said they were. What if Jonah invited Lee Morris that night to identify the real Kern Meadows? Iggy said that Jerome had told him that both Stephen Parry and Jonah knew his identity. That's one way Jonah could have been certain. He used Lee Morris. "That fits," Blackwell said. We've been trying to trace Morris. He was badly injured in the car crash and had a bleed to the brain. He spent months in hospital and then rehabilitation learning to walk again. He wasn't fit for work, so was claiming disability payments. He hasn't attended a payment review, hospital appointment, or touched his bank account since the late 1990s.
Let me guess, Meadows said. 1999. It has to be Lee Morris's remains we found in the woods. Stephen Parry kills Kern Meadows and Lee Morris, then Jonah and Jerome cover it up, Edris said.
Meadows shook his head. I can't see that happening, but then again Lee was in the car with Kern. So Stephen kills Kern, not knowing his true identity. Lee tells him that he's made a mistake, so he turns the knife on Lee. Except there is no evidence of a knife wound on victim number 2, Blackwell said. Wouldn't necessarily leave a mark, Meadows said, if he hit an artery.
That would mean that Jerome and Jonah buried the evidence and just let Stephen Parry walk away, Rain said. Yeah, that doesn't make much sense, Valentine agreed.
Meadows nodded. Jerome would have just witnessed the murder of his best friend. He would be afraid of Stephen. Put yourself in Stephen's position. 2 witnesses. Would you let them walk away? I think it's time to organize a search of the woods, Blackwell said. Meadows and Rain stood at the edge of the woods watching. The dog handlers had gone in and were walking the grids that had been marked out on a map. There were officers with metal detectors and specialist equipment that could detect subtle changes in the earth.
Do you really think they're going to find Stephen Parry's remains?
Rain asked. Yeah, I think it highly likely. We know that Stephen was present the night our father was murdered. The question is, which one killed him, Jonah or Jerome? Jerome told Iggy there'd been an accident. Maybe it was just that. One or both of them tried to wrestle the knife from Stephen and he was fatally injured. That's the simple answer.
Which doesn't answer the question of who poisoned Jerome and us, Rain said.
The only conclusion we can draw from that is Jerome was only a witness to what happened, and someone didn't want him talking, or us asking questions.
So that leaves Jonah, Rain said.
The arrival of Jenny and Mina interrupted their conversation.
We thought we'd come and see how they were doing with the search, Mina said. Do you think it will take them a long time?
I don't know, Meadows said. There's a lot of ground to cover, and they have to be thorough.
I wouldn't worry, Rain said. There's plenty of wood in the stock shed, and you won't need any for heat for a while. It's not that so much, Jenny said. It's having all these police officers traipsing back and forth. No one can relax. I'm sure you can nip down the field for a quick smoke. That's what I've been doing, Rain said.
Jenny tutted.
I've no interest in smoking that stuff. What are they hoping to find? Mina asked. Not another body, surely.
Possibly, Meadows said. They will also be looking for any weapons. Chances are the perpetrator would have wanted to get rid of a knife or anything else like clothing quickly. The likelihood is they buried it in the woods.
What good will that do? Jenny asked. They won't be able to get any evidence from it, will they?
You'd be surprised, Meadows said. Forensics is so advanced now. A minute drop of blood, a hair, something is always left behind.
I wish things would just go back to normal, Jenny said. I guess that's never going to happen.
Meadows saw tears fill Jenny's eyes before she walked away.
Is she okay?
Rain asked.
No, Mina said. She's struggling with Jerome's death. I'm just so happy you two are okay.
We have you to thank for that, Rain said. Yes, Meadows agreed. If you hadn't helped identify the belladonna, we could have been looking at a different outcome.
I just got lucky, Mina said. It could have been any number of things. You should really be thanking Jenny. She taught me everything I know. She trained as a chemist. Such a shame that she married a dick and didn't get to use her skills."
Meadows looked at Mina. She didn't seem aware of the implications of the information she had just given. Jenny would know how much belladonna would be needed to be a lethal dose. Mina shook her head.
"No, Jenny would never try to harm you two. And she adored Jerome. She was the closest to him. I guess because she knew him longer than any of us."
"I thought Jenny came to the commune after you," Rain said.
"Yeah, but Jenny knew Jerome before she came to live here," Mina said. "They went to school together. I heard them talking about their old headmaster and some of the tricks they used to get up to."
Meadows thought back to the conversation he'd had with Iggy, Cosmo, and Jenny the night he was poisoned. Jenny had acted surprised by the swap of Kern's and Jerome's identities. Why act surprised if she knew, he thought. Then there's the violets outside her yurt. She was the one to tell me the meaning of the plant. And now her knowledge of plants and medicines.
"What is it?"
Mina asked. "I'm going to speak to Jenny," he said. He looked at Rain. "Come and get me as soon as they find something." Rain nodded. Meadows walked back to Jenny's yurt with a heaviness in his heart. Why? He thought. He could think of no reason, but it all started to make sense. Mina told the group she had left Tonic in the teepee the night Jerome died. Then Jenny had left the group claiming to look for Cosmo when he'd told them all that he and Rain were going to dig the woods. Plenty of opportunity to slip the belladonna into the tonic. He stopped outside Jenny's yurt and looked once more at the violets before calling out. "Are you home?"
"Yes. Come in."
Meadows stepped into the yurt. Jenny was sitting on a purple cushion, cradling a frosted glass of liquid.
"You know, don't you?"
she said. Chapter 30. Meadows looked at Jenny. For a moment he didn't speak. He was taken by surprise. He thought he would have to challenge her, but she seemed calm, almost resigned. It was as if she had been expecting him.
"You better sit down," she said. "I won't offer you a drink."
There was a hint of a smile on her lips. Meadows took a cushion from the pile, placed it on the floor, and sat, but not too close. He didn't want to make her feel intimidated. Her yurt was homely, with most of the lattice walls covered in her paintings and pictures of her late partner, Mags. The bed had a purple throw, and the two long shelves held earthenware crockery. Everything was neat and ordered. It almost looked unlived in, as if the contents had been neatly packed away. Was she planning on running?
"So, how did he work it out?"
Jenny asked. "The violets, your knowledge of poison, and the fact you went to school with Jerome. You knew all along that he was Kern Meadows. The poison wasn't meant for Jerome. You said it was my fault he died, and I guess you were right on that point. I did give him the tonic." Jenny nodded.
"If you were still in my class, I would give you top marks. I knew you wouldn't be able to let things go, that you would keep asking questions. I expect Mina told you about my skills. I felt so bad when the police took her. If they had charged her, I would have owned up. I prepared myself, put everything in order. I would never have let her take the blame. You must make sure she knows that."
"I'm sure you'll get a chance to tell her yourself," Meadows said. "Why? What did Rain and I do to you that was so bad that you tried to kill us?" Jenny shook her head.
"I wasn't trying to kill anyone. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Well, apart from Jonah, which was different.
What do you mean?
That night at the summer solstice, when Stephen Parry turned up, I saw him talking to Kern, that is, your father, not Jerome. They went off together. Apparently, Jonah was supposed to organise the meeting between them, but Stephen had asked around and Iggy had pointed out Kern, not realising. Jonah knew by then who Kern really was, and he was going to drag Jerome into it so he'd be forced to face up to his past or let Kern take the blame. When Jonah saw that Kern and Stephen were missing, he told Jerome. They asked me if I'd seen Kern and Stephen. I could see by Jerome's face that he was worried. So I went with them to look.
Just you, Jonah, and Jerome?
Yes. When we got to the woods, Stephen was shouting at Kern. He was in such a rage. You can't blame him. He was damaged. Not enough help was given to trauma victims back then. Imagine being trapped in a car with your dead mother and sister. Kern just stood there. He didn't defend himself, just said how sorry he was for what had happened to Stephen's family. Then Stephen pulled a knife from his jacket. It was some sort of hunting knife. Jerome tried to intervene. He told Stephen that he was Kern Meadows, and that any revenge Stephen sought should be taken out on him.
Jenny shook her head and wiped away a tear that had escaped from her eye. Meadows could imagine the scene easily. A warm summer's night with the smell of the bonfire in the air, laughter and singing in the distance, and his father facing a knife. The shock they all must have felt at seeing a weapon in their peaceful home, the fear his father must have felt, and the guilt Jerome carried all those years manifested in Stephen Parry.
I'm not certain what happened next. It was all so quick, Jenny said. Stephen turned on Jerome and Kern tried to stop him. Then Kern crumpled to the floor, blood coming from his chest. Jerome tried to go to Kern to help him, but Stephen still had the knife. He was in a frenzy. Jonah just stood there watching. I thought Stephen was going to kill Jerome. We were close to the border of the woods where we'd been felling trees. There was an axe in one of the stumps. I grabbed it and swung it at Stephen. I hit him in the head. I never meant to kill him. We all just stood there for a moment. We were in shock. Then Jerome knelt down next to Kern, but he was gone. We buried them. Iggy was right when he told you why he thought they didn't call the police. Kern's identity would have come to light. You would have lost your father and found out about his past. Jerome didn't want to do that to you. He kept quiet to protect you. Kern never wanted you to know what he had done. We told Jonah if he didn't leave, then we would call the police and tell them that he had killed Stephen. He left the next morning, and we let everyone think that Kern had left too. I put the flowers on the graves, as I didn't think it was right for them not to be marked.
But it wasn't Stephen Parry's body that Rain and I found.
No, it was Jonah,
Jenny said. You said he left. He was seen after the summer solstice.
Yes, he came back just before winter solstice. He hadn't changed. He was back to his old self, interfering in people's lives. He was badgering Iggy. He had ideas on how the commune should be run. He said it needed a leader. He brought people with him, followers he called them. Jerome couldn't stand up against Jonah. He had too much to lose, and Jonah wouldn't hesitate to use what he knew about him and your father. Iggy, well, he doesn't do confrontation. He never has. Cosmo would have no chance against Jonah. Jonah would have turned this place into some sort of cult, with him dictating. I couldn't let that happen. I had to stop him. You know, us olds take it in turns to collect the mistletoe for the winter solstice. That year it was my turn. But a few days before, Jonah said it should be him. I used laurel leaves to make cyanide. It's a bit tricky, but I knew how to do it. When Jonah went into the woods that day to collect the mistletoe, I followed. Everyone was busy with the preparations. I took a small bottle of elderberry port laced with cyanide. I told him I wanted to talk to him alone. I gave him a load of bullshit about supporting him as leader, that I would persuade the others to follow. I poured the drinks and said we should have a toast to new beginnings. He didn't suspect a thing. He drank down his port in one go. I only raised mine to my lips. It didn't take long to work, a minute or two at the most. I'd started digging the grave over the 2 previous nights. It was a risk, but no one stumbled upon it. I dragged his body to the hole and rolled him in, covered him up, and that was the end of that. I did go back, though, and plant some violets.
His absence must have been noticed, Meadows said.
Yes, but I don't think anyone was bothered. His followers left not long after, and things went back to normal.
Did Jerome know what you had done?
No, I didn't tell anyone. It was better that way.
So it was really just Rain and me you wanted to kill?
No, I didn't want to kill you. If that was the case, I would have used cyanide. I just wanted to make you ill. I got the idea when Martin's girls went down with the virus. I also had to make a few more people sick so you wouldn't get suspicious. I put juice from the belladonna berries into Cosmo's wine and in the tonic Mina gave you in the evenings. Then I grated the root and put it in among your tea. If I thought you had taken too much, I would doctor Mina's tonic with carbonated charcoal. Then you gave Jerome the tonic. It was meant for the 2 of you, and he drank the lot. It was too much.
But why? Meadows asked. Why would you want to make us so ill?
I just wanted to stop you asking questions. I needed time to figure out what I was going to do. None of us wanted you to find out about your father's past, so it was easy to persuade them to keep quiet about Jonah and the things that had gone on. I wanted to keep you distracted. I knew you wouldn't be able to stay for too long. If you were unwell, you wouldn't be thinking straight. I thought the investigation would be fruitless. The case would be closed and you'd go back to work. Another case would come along and take up your time. You could give your father a proper burial and move on. Maybe you'd keep up the search for Jonah for a while. You'd blame him for your father's death. It was his fault after all. The poison was just supposed to slow you down. You were never meant to get seriously ill. I was sure Mina would help identify the belladonna. I wouldn't have let you or Rain die.
Someone wanted me to know the truth, Meadows said. They led me into the woods.
There was no one who could have done that. No one knew about Jonah and where he was buried. I should have guessed you'd figure out the significance of the violets. I thought about moving Jonah, but digging up the grave was too risky. I moved the plants, but left a few in a spot where I knew you wouldn't find anything. I thought you'd just dig there and that would be it. I didn't expect you to keep digging, especially as you wouldn't be thinking straight with a belladonna in your system. It can cause all sorts of symptoms, hallucinations and loss of memory being just a couple. It should have been enough to keep you away. I suppose it's my own fault. I shouldn't have planted the flowers, but even Jonah deserved some respect in death. I am sorry about Stephen. That was an accident, and I don't blame him for what he did that night. He must have suffered years of torment. Then Jonah came along and stoked the fire. As for Jerome, I will never forgive myself for his death.
You know I'm going to have to tell Sergeant Blackwell. I don't have a choice.
I know, and I understand. I don't want you to feel guilty. There's just one thing I'd like you to do for me."
Jenny took an envelope from her pocket.
"Like I told you, I prepared myself. Please give this to my daughter, Clover. Her address is on the front. She will be expecting bad news."
"What do you mean?" Meadows asked.
"I'm dying. Cervical cancer. It's spread and there is nothing they can do now. I want it to be in my own home, on my own terms."
She looked down at the glass she'd been cradling. "No!" Meadows pitched forward and tried to knock the glass away, but Jenny twisted her body and gulped down the liquid. There was no time to save her, and as Meadows cradled her in his arms, she took her last breath. Chapter 31. Meadows walked into the office, clean-shaven and dressed in a suit. He smiled as his team broke into a round of applause.
"It's good to have you back," Valentine said. "It hasn't been the same without you." "Yeah, we missed you," Paskin said. "Not as much as Edris has."
"Yeah, any longer and I would have packed my desk up," Edris said. "Not before I booted you out," Blackwell said. "You've done nothing but whine the whole time." "Yeah, because you've had me stuck in the office or traipsing through fields looking for a dead person." "Well, we didn't know he was dead," Blackwell snapped. "Glad to see nothing's changed in my absence," Meadows said. "It's good to be back. Did you have a good holiday, Paskin?"
"Feels like it was months ago now, but yeah, it was great."
Meadows looked at the incident board, which still displayed all the information from the investigation. It was a strange feeling to see his father's name up there, and the picture of Jerome brought a fresh wave of pain. "We were going to clear all that away before you got back," Blackwell said. "It's just we had a shout and things got busy. Just so you know, all the information we gathered about your father is only known by the team and DCI Leicester. No one else knows, and it will stay that way." The team all nodded their heads in agreement. "Thank you. I appreciate your discretion," Meadows said. "Edris, you can pack it all away now. The case is closed," Blackwell said. There were still a lot of unanswered questions. Some they would probably never find the answers to. Meadows didn't like loose ends, and there was something troubling him, but he couldn't work out what it was. "Did you manage to track down Lee Morris?" he asked. "No, but we do have a confession, so there is nothing left to do. And, well, there will be no trial," Blackwell said. Meadows nodded. "I'll give you a hand to file this lot." He stepped up to the board and looked at the last remains that were found. "Stephen Parry?" "Yeah, we found him close to where your father was buried. DNA was a match to his sister. Cause of death is consistent with a blow to the head with an axe, as Jenny described. We found the axe buried along with a hunting knife. Everything she told you tallies," Blackwell said. "You put up my notes," Meadows said. Edris laughed. "Yeah, the ones we could make sense of." Meadows took them down and read through what he had written. Among them were the initial notes he had made when he first spoke to the Olds. "This isn't right," he said. "What?" Valentine asked. "Jenny wasn't at the summer solstice in 1999. I made a note of it." "Well, of course she would have told you that," Blackwell said. "Distance herself from the crime. It's only because she thought we would find the weapon and be able to get DNA that she confessed." "I don't think so," Meadows said. "Her son died that year. I remember because it was not long after my father left."
"Yeah, but it could have been any time before or after the murder," Valentine said.
"Paskin, could you check birth and death records, please? Look for Carl... I wrote down Jenny's married name somewhere. Ah, here it is. Jones." I think you're looking at problems that aren't there,
Blackwell said. What if she was protecting someone? Meadows asked. Take her own life to stop someone getting caught, Valentine said. It would need to be someone that was more than just a friend. You said her partner died.
Yes, she did. She has a daughter, Clover. She's a bit older than me. She visits the commune, but she left to study before we left. Then she worked and lived up in York. I can't see that she would be involved. Jenny was dying, and it doesn't sound like she had long left. The people in the commune were her family. I don't think it's such a stretch that she would take the blame for one of them. Meadows continued looking through all the notes and information on the incident board. Blackwell returned to his desk, and Valentine went off to make tea, leaving Edris standing next to Meadows looking at the notes. Found him, Paskin said. Carl Jones. Death was registered on the 25th of June 1999. He died on the 22nd. Meadows did a quick Google search. Summer solstice fell on the 21st of June that year. She wouldn't have left him. She was with him when he died. How can you be certain? Blackwell asked. Her daughter would know, Meadows said. I think it's worth talking to her. Do you want me to put the information back on the incident board? Edris asked. No, Blackwell said. The case is closed. Put it all back, Meadows said, until we are sure. Fine, Blackwell huffed. Once all the information was pinned back, Meadows stood back and looked. Now he had a clear head, it was easier to process the information. The disappearance of Lee Morris is troubling, particularly as the last trace of him was 1999. I hope you are not suggesting we search the woods again, Blackwell said. He could be there, Paskin said. We did stop digging after Jenny's confession, Valentine said. Yeah, because we had already found Stephen Parry's remains. We had no reason to believe anyone else would be buried there. We still don't, Blackwell said. Maybe that's why she confessed, Paskin said, to stop us finding more bodies. She confessed to killing Stephen Parry and Jonah. Why not confess to Lee Morris if she killed him? Edris asked. Because I don't think she killed them. Meadows said. Maybe she didn't know about Lee Morris. The only ones left that she would be protecting are these. He pointed to the board. Iggy, Cosmo, and Mina. What does it matter? Blackwell asked. Even if she is protecting one of these people, we have no proof. There's no evidence to use in a conviction. The only way we would get anywhere is if they confessed. I can't see that happening. You're right, Meadows said, but we'll know the truth. Clover is staying with her aunt, Jenny's sister, until the funeral. My mother went to see them yesterday. We need to speak to her to confirm her mother wasn't at the summer solstice that year. If the only thing we achieve is that Clover's memories of her mother are not tainted by her killing 3 people, then I'll be happy with that. I know how it feels to carry that knowledge. Blackwell looked like he was about to protest. Then he shrugged his shoulders. Your call. Meadows looked at Edris. Come on, let's go. Edris's face lit up, and he grabbed his jacket. Clover answered the door, and her eyes filled with tears when she saw Meadows. Winter, it's so good to see you. It's been a long time. She hugged him tightly, then drew back and brushed her tears away with her fingers. Come in. This is Sergeant Edris, Meadows said as he followed her. Is this an official visit? Clover asked. Yes and no, Meadows said. I wanted to come and see you, but I also need to ask you a few questions. They entered the sitting room, and a woman who looked remarkably like Jenny rose from an armchair. This is my Auntie Laura, Clover said, and introduced Meadows and Edris. I'm so sorry for your loss, Meadows said. Jenny was a lovely woman. Thank you, Laura said. Please have a seat. Can I get you anything to drink? No, we're good, thanks, Meadows said as he sat down on the sofa.
I heard you were with Mum when she died,
Clover said.
Did she?
It was very quick, Meadows said. She didn't suffer.
I'm just glad she wasn't alone.
Meadows could sense an awkwardness in the two women, and he guessed it had to do with Jenny's confession. There was no way to avoid the subject, so he thought it best to just bring it out rather than try to mask it with polite talk. I wasn't officially investigating the case at the commune because of my personal involvement, he said. I understand that Sergeant Blackwell talked you through what your mother told me before she died.
I still can't believe it, Laura said. She said in her letter that she was sorry and that she hoped I understood, Clover said. I'm trying. She did those things to protect the people she loved. Faced with a man and a knife, who knows how any of us would act? The poisoning, well, that's different. She planned it, and she nearly killed you and Rain. It doesn't tie with the woman I knew, not my mother.
There are some things that are unclear, Meadows said, and looked at Edris. Edris opened his notebook. Your brother Carl died on the 22nd of June 1999. Is that correct?
Yes,
Clover said. Your mother was with him when he died? Clover looked alarmed.
You don't think that she... No, there is no way. She wouldn't...
It's nothing like that, Meadows said. The thought hadn't occurred to him that she may have eased her son's passing. It wasn't a line of inquiry that he wanted to go down. It's too late now, he thought. We just need to establish your mother's whereabouts at the time.
She was with Carl,
Laura said. The whole time? Edris asked.
Yes, for about 2 weeks. He died here. She didn't want him to die in hospital, so we made arrangements for him to come here. We had help. The Macmillan nurses were fabulous, but Jenny never left his side. He died in the early hours of the morning with her holding his hand. Why is this important? Clover asked.
The night your mother said she hit Stephen Parry in self-defense was the 21st of June 1999, Meadows said. If, as you say, he was here the whole time, then she can't possibly have killed Stephen Parry, Edris added.
Why would she say she did?
Laura asked. That's what we are trying to find out, Meadows said. Who did Jenny care so much about that she would let you and Clover believe she had killed a man rather than let that person face the consequences?
There is no one,
Clover said.
Other than us and Lee, no, we're all the family she has,
Laura said. Lee? Lee Morris? Meadows asked.
Yes, Lee is our brother. Morris was my maiden name. Jenny is the oldest. Lee is our younger brother.
We've been looking for him, Edris said. Both Laura and Clover looked puzzled.
Has something happened to him?
Laura asked.
I haven't seen him in a while. I thought he would come here after Jenny died.
Could you give us his address? Edris asked. He's not in any trouble. We just need to speak to him. Clover looked at Meadows.
Is he not living in the commune anymore?
Lee lived in the commune, Meadows asked.
Yes, he went there 3 years ago,
Laura said. Meadows tried to think through all the people that had lived there when he had been a child. He couldn't remember Jenny having a brother. Your brother had an accident when he was younger, he said.
Yes, when he was 15. He was in a stolen car with Patrick and Kern Meadows and, what was the other boy's name? Nicholas, I think. Kern Meadows was your father, Clover said. Mum never told me this.
Meadows didn't want to correct her. It was too complicated. Yes, he said. I only just found out myself.
Lee was badly injured, Laura said. It took months of rehab for him to be able to walk and talk. He was never the same. Jenny took him to live in the commune with her. You know him, Clover said. Oh, probably as Cosmo.
Chapter 32. Steel-grey clouds met with the mountaintop, and sheep huddled together as Meadows steered the car around the winding mountain road. "Looks like a storm is coming," Edris said. "At least it will cool things down." Meadows nodded. The weather was the least of his concerns. If he was right, then Jenny's efforts to protect her brother were in vain. "Are you okay?" Edris asked. "You're very quiet." "I'm fine," Meadows said. "I just didn't expect to be going back to the commune so soon. They're all still in mourning, and I'm not sure of the welcome I'll get."
"None of it is your fault," Edris said. "I'm sure no one there blames you for what happened to Jenny. If they hadn't kept secrets, it could have been a different outcome."
"There still would have been an arrest, maybe 2.
"Why 2?
I'm not sure about Jonah's murder. Every one of them knew about the swap. They also knew that Cosmo was Lee Morris. It's going to be hard to trust anything they say. I've been thinking back to the conversations I've had with them all. I don't think I spoke to Cosmo alone. I think they made sure that someone was always with him, because if anyone was likely to blurt out the truth, it would have been him. It's the poison that concerns me. I'm not sure Cosmo would know how to make cyanide."
"We'll just have to see what reaction we get when we ask him," Edris said. "I still can't believe Lee Morris was at the commune the whole time. At least we won't have to go digging for any more bodies."
They arrived at the commune to find life going on as normal. Meadows guessed there wasn't time for people to wallow in grief. He saw several of the men carrying sandbags. They greeted him with the usual smiles and stopped to chat for a moment. They saw Martin, who seemed to be organizing the group.
"What's going on?" Edris asked.
"Storm is coming," he said. "We need to weigh down any of the homes that are at risk from high winds."
"I haven't seen the forecast," Edris said. "Is it going to be a bad storm?"
Martin laughed.
"We don't need a forecast. You can smell it in the air."
Edris looked amused, but didn't comment.
"We better get on," Martin said.
"You seen Cosmo around?" Meadows asked.
"Probably checking on the hives," Martin said.
"Thanks," Meadows said. They walked through the lavender field and into a meadow that was speckled with wildflowers. Cosmo could be seen moving between the hives.
"Shouldn't he be in protective clothing?" Edris asked.
"He's never bothered," Meadows said. "He talks to them, says they understand each other."
"Don't come any closer," Cosmo called out. "You'll upset them."
"We need to talk to you," Meadows said.
"I'm busy."
Cosmo turned his back on them.
"It's important,"
Edris shouted. Cosmo turned around and stomped towards them.
"I'm not in the mood for talking." "Do you think he's dangerous?"
Edris whispered. "Nah, he's just like his bees," Meadows said. "Angry buzzing, that's all it is. It's his nature, probably a result of the accident."
"I'm sorry," Meadows said to Cosmo, "but this can't wait." "Fine. What do you want?"
"Maybe it's better if we talk indoors," Meadows suggested. Cosmo looked at Edris.
"Does he have to come?"
"Yes," Meadows said. "We need to speak to you officially." He saw a flash of fear in Cosmo's eyes and thought he was going to take off, but he just sighed and his shoulders slumped.
"Okay,"
Cosmo said. They didn't talk until they got back to Cosmo's yurt. Meadows didn't want anything they said to be overheard. He thought Cosmo deserved their discretion no matter what he had done. Inside was a mess. Piles of clothes and unwashed dishes. Cosmo moved around some things, then sat on the floor and started drumming his fingers on his legs. Meadows grabbed a cushion and handed it to Edris before sitting down. "Edris needs to ask you a few questions," Meadows said. Go on then, Cosmo said. During our investigation into the death of Kern Meadows, we interviewed people who were involved in the car crash and their families, Edris said. Which Kern Meadows are you talking about? Cosmo asked. The real Kern Meadows, Jerome, Meadows said. One of the people we were trying to contact was Lee Morris, Edris continued. Meadows watched Cosmo's reaction. He shifted, then jiggled his legs in time with the drumming of his fingers. He made no comment. We know you are Lee Morris, Meadows said. Cosmo's eyes narrowed. Who told you that? We spoke to your sister, Laura, Edris said. Who else knows? No one, Meadows said. Why didn't you tell me? I left Lee behind a long time ago. I'm Cosmo. I understand, Meadows said. No, you don't. You've no idea what it's like. Then tell us, Meadows said. The night of the car crash, it wasn't Kern. Not driving? Edris offered. Cosmo shot him a look and shook his head. Fault, he said. His brother Patrick and Nicholas were always in trouble. They were in the same class as Jenny. I was with Kern, but the youngest. Kern and me were hanging around that night, bored. We went to the park, and Patrick and Nick were there drinking. They gave us some cider. It went straight to our heads. They thought it was... Cosmo hit the side of his head. It's okay. Take your time, Meadows said. Funny, yeah, they laughed. Then one of them rolled a joint and handed it around. It made me feel... Stoned? Edris asked. Grown up. It was Patrick's idea to steal the car. He'd done it before. They took it in turns to drive. Patrick and Nick. Then they got bored. They wanted us to have a go. Kern didn't want to, but I was up for it. The car was an automatic, so it was easy, like a bumper car. I drove around for a while, and then we all sort of pushed Kern into doing the same. We went on the back roads. Patrick was telling Kern to go faster. He took the bend too fast. Then it was just lights and crunching metal. Cosmo put his hands over his ears as if he could still hear the noise. The last thing I remember was that boy screaming. Kern never said a word about me driving. He took all the blame. He was in prison by the time I was after hospital. You went to visit him? Edris said. Yeah, a few times. Jenny took me on the bus. I couldn't get in a car. I went as often as I could. No one else visited him. His parents blamed him for Patrick dying. Philip didn't have any visitors, so Kern asked me to request a visit with him.
After that, the three of us would spend visiting time together.
Did you see them when they got out?
Yeah, a few times, and I met Iggy. You know the rest. Jenny came to live here, and then I came. I've been here ever since. I got used to calling Philip Kern and Kern Jerome. Sometimes I would mess up, but no one took any notice. Everything was good. Jenny looked after me. They all did. I would never have had this life if the police knew I had been driving that night.
You were only 15 at the time. I doubt you would have got a sentence, even if the police knew the part you played, Meadows said. You shouldn't feel guilty. Is that why Jenny took the blame for what happened to Stephen Parry that night? She knew how you felt about the accident, knew you were afraid of people finding out. She didn't want you to go to prison. Cosmo looked at the floor. Clover will believe that her mother did those things. Is that how you want Jenny remembered? There has been enough blame and guilt.
I don't want that,
Cosmo said. I know, Meadows said. You hit Stephen Parry because you were afraid. Is that what happened?
He killed Kern. He was going to kill Jerome. And then he would have killed me. I just wanted to stop him.
You told Jenny what had happened?
Yeah, she knew something was wrong. I told her that Jerome had made Jonah leave, but I didn't feel safe. She told me to leave Lee behind. No more hospital checkups. No more using my bank account. She said if anyone came looking for Stephen Parry, then there would be no connection to me.
And then Jonah came back, Edris said.
Yeah, but not for long. He went away again. Jenny said he wouldn't bother us again, but she was wrong. He came back.
This was what worried Meadows. He saw the look of confusion on Cosmo's face. What do you mean he came back? Edris asked.
He poisoned Jerome.
He looked at Meadows.
And you and Rain. He led you into the woods to show you where Stephen Parry was buried.
No, Meadows said. Jonah has been dead a long time. That last time he came back, Jenny poisoned him and buried him in the woods. They were his remains that me and Rain found.
No, Cosmo said. Jenny wouldn't hurt anyone.
She wanted to make sure you were safe, Meadows said. He didn't want to tell him that she was the one to poison Jerome.
What's going to happen to me now?
Honestly, I don't know. I will have to call Detective Blackwell. He'll take you to the station to give a statement. There will likely be a trial, but you may get a lenient judge. You did act in self-defense. I'll do all I can to help you, and I'm sure Iggy and Mina will do the same.
Do I have to go with you now? I need to finish checking the bees.
I'm sure that will be okay. Just don't leave the commune. Meadows stepped out of the yurt as the first drops of rain fell. Do you think it's okay to leave him? Edris asked. Yeah, he's not likely to do a runner. Even if he did, he won't get far. He can't drive, and you heard what he said about getting in a car.
Yeah,
Edris pulled up his hood. There's still one thing I don't understand. If Jenny was the only one who knew about Jonah being buried in the woods, then who was creeping around? Someone was in your teepee. Someone led you to Jonah's body. I don't think there was anyone, Meadows said. Jenny said that belladonna poisoning can give you hallucinations. I think it was my mind's way of processing what I had seen. I've been in those woods near the old sycamore tree countless times over the years. The violets must have been there the whole time. I just didn't remember and make the connection. Then again, in the polytunnel, I knocked over the violets. Nah, I don't see it, Edris said. Then what's your theory? Well, it's obvious. You saw a ghost. Meadows laughed, and it felt good. I wonder how you ever passed your sergeant's exam. Come on, let's go and see Iggy before it chucks it down. I want him to keep an eye on Cosmo. They found Iggy sitting under the awning of his caravan, holding hands with Mina. Hello, kiddo, Iggy said. How are you doing? I'm okay, Meadows said. I've just been having a talk to Cosmo. You knew he was Lee Morris? Yes, I did. What are you talking about? Mina asked. I'll explain later, Iggy said. Why didn't you tell me? Meadows asked. It wasn't my story to tell. Besides, it wouldn't have made a difference. It may have, Meadows said. Cosmo was in the woods that night with Stephen Parry. I'll let him tell you, but he's going to need a lot of help and support. I hear you have a good legal team. Iggy nodded. I'll get onto it. I was hoping to see you before the funeral. I have something for you. Hold on. Iggy went into the caravan and came out a few moments later with an envelope. Jerome asked me to look after this and give it to you if something happened to him. When? Oh, years ago. He handed the envelope to Meadows. Meadows sat down on one of Iggy's chairs, opened the letter, and read. Dear Winter, there are so many things I need to tell you, but now it comes to it, I find I don't have the words. Instead, I'll just stick to the things that are important. You have been like a son to me, and I am so proud of you and your brother, as I know your father would have been. There may be things you find out about me after I'm gone. I hope you won't think any less of me. The commune land now belongs to you. I know you will take care of the place and the people that live here. A man left this land to his grandson. He wanted him to have a second chance. That grandson grasped it with both hands and in turn allowed others the chance to do the same. The land is his legacy and your home always. With all my love, Jerome. Meadows folded the letter and put it in his pocket. He knew exactly what to do, the same as Jerome had done. The commune was for people who needed it, the land owned by those who worked it. Like Jerome, he would never lay claim to it. The end. You've been listening to Winter's Cry by Cheryl Rees-Price, narrated by Andy Creswell, published by Quest Audiobooks, an imprint of W.F. Howes Limited. This recording is copyrighted by W.F. Howes Limited.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.